Good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public that are with us this evening. And can I also welcome those watching on YouTube? Item 1 of our planning meeting is apologies for absence, and we have a full house, so I have no apologies for absence. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct of members? Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to declare NPI in item 5E 220073 land north of Osier Way, Sybil Headingham. I would have what you call a predetermination bias as the cabinet member who signed off the decision for disposal of the land. Therefore, I cannot sit and make a decision on this application tonight, so I will leave the meeting at that item. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Chair. I think I should just declare an interest as a member of Essex County Council with the amounts of potential highways that could be discussed tonight on the application. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm aware of a couple of members in the gallery this evening that are known to me. It's not in a personal capacity, and I won't need to lead the meeting. And clearly, we all know Councillor Jackie Powell as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Is anyone else? I was going to do a joint declaration on behalf of us all that we all know Councillor Jackie Powell. She is a fellow member, so that will be a joint declaration on behalf of us all. So that covers that one.
Sorry, Chairman. Could Councillor Schweer just confirm which applications he's declaring his interest on? Is it all of them or just a specific one?
Yeah, it's just that at least 2 or 3 of them, but in particular Sybil Headingham and Oak Road.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Item 3. I have the minutes of the 5th of April to sign. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record? If so, could I have a move?
Move as a correct record, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Is it your wish that I sign them as a correct? All those in favour? Thank you. That brings us on to item 4, public question time. We have no general questions on planning this evening. Those members wishing to speak will speak prior to each application in which they have an interest. That brings us on to item 5, planning applications. And the first application this evening is 5A. This is application 2101772 out. Land south of Coggeshall Road, Bradwell. It can be found on pages 6 to 52. I do have speakers on this application. And the first person that wishes to speak is Mrs. Marie Webb. And I believe she's here. Mrs. Webb, would you like to come to the table and make your statement? And can I remind you, you have 3 minutes. Yes. If you press the button on the right of the speaker, when the red light comes on, we know we can hear you. That's lovely, thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Mrs. Marie Webb, and I live at number 3, Rectory Meadow, and I represent the residents of Rectory Meadow. And we ask this application be refused on the following reasons. Despite the planning officer's statements to the contrary in part 1.5 of her report, this application does not comply with the exception criteria 7B of the Bradwell Neighbourhood Plan, which explicitly states that there should be no linear extension to Rectory Meadow. The applicant states on the application form that the site is part of Rectory Meadow. He does not own all the land as shown shaded on the site location plan, included in page 7 of the application. Specifically, the site entrance is shown as including Rectory Meadow. Rectory Meadow is a private road owned by the residents of Rectory Meadow. The applicant stated on the application form that no new or altered vehicle access proposed to or from the public highway. The site owned by the applicant does not have any access to or from the public highway. The applicant certifies that the applicant has given the requisite notice to everyone. I'm sorry, I'm going fast, I'm Welsh. And
It's fine, you carry on.
so it has given the requisite notice to everyone else as listed below, who on the day 21 days before the date of this application was the owner of any part of the land or building to which this application relates. He did not list the owners of the site, and not one of the residents of Rectory Meadow has been given the requisite notice. Essex Highways have confirmed that as sole owner of the road, the residents can block access to anyone not a resident of Rectory Meadow, as long as the footpath access is maintained. At no time have the residents of Rectory Meadow given permission for access to the site via Rectory Meadow, nor do they intend to do so. Consequently, there will be no vehicular access to the site, no vehicular access to construction traffic, and no vehicular access for residential cars. For the avoidance of doubt, we understand that the planning permission does not have the power to grant access across private land without the landowner's permission, and you do not have the permission, nor does the applicant. Consequently, this application must be refused.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Do I stay here?
No, not now.
Thank you.
The next person wishing to make a statement on this application is the agent, Mr. Mark Jackson, and Mr. Mark Jackson is visiting us remotely. Good evening, Mr. Jackson. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Very well, thank you. Would you like to make your statement now, please?
Thank you. Good evening, members. Sorry I'm not able to be with you tonight. I'm just recovering from COVID and still got a bit of the symptoms. So good evening, members and Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm instructed by the applicants in this matter. Outline planning permission is sought for the erection of 5 houses and 1 bungalow. The application includes details of the access, layout and scale. The matters of appearance and landscaping are reserved. The application follows on from the adoption in July 2019 by the District Council of the Bradwell with Paterswick Neighbourhood Plan. This forms part of the Council Development Plan. The application is required to be determined in accordance with the Development Plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Policy 7 regarding housing of the Neighbourhood Plan supports the development of small-scale residential development adjoining the village settlement as an exception, which will contribute towards the future viability and sustainability of the village on sites adjacent to the settlement, which are not a linear extension. The proposal is for a mixture of homes, a 2-bedroom bungalow, 2 family houses and 3 2-bedroom houses. This seeks to address the Parish Council's neighbourhood plan. The supporting text, the housing policy within the neighbourhood plan, states that there is a need for a greater proportion of smaller dwellings and starter homes to provide a better balance of housing types, which will serve the needs of both the younger and older population. We are of the opinion that the proposal fully accords with the neighbourhood plan and is compatible with the development plan policies relating to the quality of design and protection of the countryside. The proposal will also provide a new, safe and dedicated footway to the bus stops of the village, as well as by biodiversity enhancement. The application was made following pre-application advice. This was provided by the planning officers, the County Council Highways Officer and the County Footpaths Officer. The application has also been drafted in response to the comments of the National Highways, the County Council Ecologists, the Council Environmental Health Department and the Health and Waste Management Team. As per the officer's recommendation for approval, the proposal therefore accords with the Development Plan Policy 7 in response to and accords with the remaining local plan policies, NPPF and the relevant development control policies and standards of the Council. Therefore, we respectfully invite the Council to grant planning permission subject to the drawings and planning conditions listed on pages 34 to 40 of the agenda. And just on those comments made earlier, you can still hear me, notice was served on those owners that are in control of part of the access road, and that the client has confirmed that he has full rights for vehicle and pedestrian access over the access road. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you very much. Members, that brings us to the end of statements on this application. I just need to clear something with Katie. Katie, Chris emailed me last week and said that this application was going to be presented by Janine Rowley. She's obviously not here, and that she was also doing 5D. Can you tell me who are doing those two now, please?
I'm doing the first one.
Yes.
And then Melanie's doing 5D.
Thank you very much. I didn't know. I hadn't had any new...
I did email you this afternoon.
Ah, sorry, I was probably... thank you. Thank you for that. Now, members, will come to the presentation, which is going to be made by Katie. Thank you.
The application before you is an outline application seeking planning permission for the erection of 5 houses and 1 bungalow. Permission is sought as part of the outline for access, layout and scale, with appearance and landscaping reserved for later consideration. So the site is the land to the south of Coggeshall Road in Bradwell. So the site location plan there is shown in red. So Coggeshall Road runs through the middle, land to the south. This portion here will be where the housing is proposed. There's a proposal for a pedestrian access to join onto the existing footpath network along Coggeshall Road, and then vehicular access to come in from the south up through Rectory Meadow and a private track into the site here. There's a number of public rights of way, so one that runs from Rectory Meadow to the west, joining over here, and then there's one that runs up the track to the bottom of the south of this part of the site, and then it continues west up to meet the A120 in the north. So in terms of just an aerial view, this is a portion of the site here where the housing would be located. The pedestrian access would run through here to meet Coggeshall Road, and then the vehicular access come in through Rectory Meadow and round to there. So there's existing residential properties to the north that front onto Coggeshall Road, and then there's existing properties, residential properties to the east in Forge Crescent. So in terms of location plan, just a larger view, just showing context, these are properties here that front onto Coggeshall Road. The location of the housing would be in this portion of the site here, and then the existing properties in Forge Crescent and Chapel Rise to the east. In terms of the site layout, layout is sought at this stage. There's 6 units altogether. Plot 1 here is proposed to be a bungalow, and then you've got 2 4-bed detached houses and 3 2-bed terraced of 3 houses here. All of the properties meet the requirements in terms of garden size, back-to-back distances, and are all served with parking to meet the adopted standard. In terms of this layout, it shows the same as before, but as part of the officer report, you will see that there is an outline planning permission just to the south of the site for 3 units. That was granted on appeal, and it remains extant. In terms of highways, so Coggeshall Road is this side of the site now. They're proposing a 2-metre wide footpath here that will link up to the footpath along Coggeshall Road. The public rights of way, shown here in green and here, would remain unobstructed, and then the new formal footpath would run all the way up the access and then connect to the pedestrian access out onto Coggeshall Road. The designs of the houses, the appearance of the houses is reserved at the current time, but the applicant has just provided illustrative elevations to show what could come forward at a later date. In terms of photos, this is a view looking from the west of the site towards properties along Coggeshall Road. This is standing upon part of the access driveway looking north, and this property here fronts onto Coggeshall Road. This is the eastern side of the site, and this is one of the properties that backs onto the site in Forge Crescent. This is looking west, so again those properties you can see are at front Coggeshall Road, and again that looks west, the western part of the site. And this is standing at the western part of the site, looking towards the east here, and then the properties on Coggeshall Road on this side. In terms of just where the public footpath would connect, this is a view looking west along the A120 along Coggeshall Road, so the footpath connection would be approximately at this point here. So just taking a view further back, this is the junction with Riverside, and the pedestrian access at the point where the red line is shown. And then just looking the other way, looking east along Coggeshall Road, again the location of the proposed pedestrian access. So in terms of the planning balance and recommendation, there is a conflict with the development plan and the Section 2 plan, given the site is located in the countryside, so it's beyond the settlement boundary, albeit adjacent to it. What we do have to consider is Policy 7 of the neighbourhood plan, which forms part of the development plan, which does allow for small-scale residential development beyond the settlement boundary as an exception, where it can demonstrate significant contribution towards maintaining the future viability and sustainability of the settlement, and also where such sites are located next to a settlement and don't provide for linear extension. In this case, officers would consider, or it is adjacent to a settlement boundary, and we don't consider it to be a form of linear development. It would also, there's 6 units, which is not insignificant. It would help to maintain the future viability of the settlement, with extra residents using public transport and the facilities that are available in the immediate location. There are limited facilities in Bradwell, but there does have the provision of bus stops offering onward connections. When the planning inspector was considering the south sites to the south, they concluded that although private car journeys would be generated from the development, it would not be wholly reliant on the use of the private car, with other modes of transport, sustainable transport, available within acceptable distances of the site, and there's no reason why we would take a different view for this site, and also obviously with the pedestrian access through to Coggeshall Road, that makes that a bit easier. There's no highway concerns for either the pedestrian or the vehicular access, with both National Highways and the Essex County Council having been consulted and raising no objection. The layout and the scale of the scheme is considered to be acceptable and in keeping with the surroundings. No visual harm has been identified to the countryside, and no impact on residential amenity, heritage assets, trees or ecology has been identified either. The scheme would provide for 6 market dwellings, and makes a positive contribution to the housing stock, and it does provide for some smaller units, which is specifically identified as a need within the neighbourhood plan. There would be some economic and social benefits during the construction phase and thereafter, and we also do have to consider the extant permission to the south of the site, which was similar in terms of it being a windfall site beyond the settlement boundary. So our officer's recommendation to you is that when considering the planning balance and having regard to the adverse impacts and the benefits, we conclude that the benefits of the proposal do outweigh the adverse impacts in this case, and the application is recommended for approval. I would just note that I would just propose a couple of amendments to conditions, just to remove conditions 14 and 15, as they are replicated in error. They are already there as conditions 11 and 12. Thank you.
Do you think you could respond to the speaker's query on the access?
Yep, as the agent has confirmed, the owners have served the correct certificate, being Certificate B, so they've notified those other people that have an interest in the red areas of land within the red line site. In terms of vehicular access, if those other owners of the access don't wish to give their consent for this applicant to use that access, that would be a private matter between themselves, and that wouldn't be dependent on planning permission.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know this site very well. I've represented Bradwell for 18 years as a BDC councillor, a county council, or both. I think officers are relying quite heavily on the neighbourhood plan, which is quite unusual, in that clause has been put in there. I don't know if the Parish Council might want to retrospectively revisit the wording now. But I think actually it's a moot point whether the BDC officers can rely so much on the neighbourhood plan policy. I don't think it's quite as clear cut as is being made out, but in any case it's clearly contrary to the BDC plan, because it's not land allocated in either the current or proposed new plan, and it's not, and it is outside the village, it's in the countryside. I've got a number of questions I'd like to ask, please. The access is clearly a big issue for residents, as is not surprising. The access through Rectory Meadow is very twisty and turny. It goes through a number of turns. It's quite narrow. There is a construction design condition 3, but it doesn't actually mention, there's lots of clauses in it, but it doesn't actually mention how traffic would be managed along the access road. Should that be in there? I think what officers have done is they've taken the wording from the previous inspector's decision for the 3 houses and just put it into this application. But we're now, of course, dealing with potentially a cumulative impact issue where we've got the 3 and these. But knowing that lane, it is very narrow through there. So is there anything that could be put in terms of management of the traffic along the road itself? Second issue is also regarding to access. It's said in the officer report that discussions have been had with National Highways about crossing the A120. Well, I've done that a few times. And as you get older, you need to be thinking about the distance more and more. When you're younger, you sprint. It's extremely dangerous. Could officers tell us where National Highways think people should cross to the bus stop, the eastbound bus stop on the other side of the road, if it is not via the pedestrian crossing, the signalised pedestrian crossing, which is much further down Coggeshall Road? And my other question related to trees. On the slide it says there's no impact on trees, yet on page 26 it sets out a significant number of trees and hedges are going to be removed. And as a request, if I may, Madam Chairman, through you, could we have, when we have each of these applications, a really clear schedule each time of how many trees are going to be removed? Because we get a lot of wordage. It doesn't actually define. It's groups of this and this and that. And you have to almost go through it forensically to work out how many trees. And how many trees are going to be planted. So the officer says no impact. But for there to be no impact, we'd have to be able to assess what's coming out and what's numbers and quality and species, and also what is the developer proposing to replace with, in order to have any idea of whether there's any biodiversity net gain. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Would you like to respond before I move on, please?
In terms of the trees, we can look at obviously putting a schedule or making it more clearer in the reports from now on as to what's coming out and what's going. In this case, it's in outline, and it's unusual in the fact that layout is for consideration, but landscaping isn't. So we've got the tree report and our report like we should have, but we don't know what's going back. So we would have to consider that at that stage. It's not something we can do as part of this application because landscaping isn't for consideration. So it'd have to be it's a 2-part process as per the outline. In terms of managing traffic along the road, I think we probably could put something into the condition to get the applicant to give us some details of how they propose to manage deliveries and oncoming traffic and such like into the conditions, so we can do that. I'm afraid I can't answer your question about where people should cross on the road. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this application is complicated from our point of view in that we've got to consider also 2 additional sources of information that we don't normally have. That's a neighbourhood plan, Bradwell with Paterswick, and a part relevant appeal decision as well. And we've got to be mindful of what's included in both of those pieces of evidence. Now, my reading of the local plan, the neighbourhood plan rather, is that this proposal does comply with Policy 7 exception criteria for development outside the defined settlement boundaries. A particular clause that was put in the neighbourhood plan, as I read it, to allow just such events as this to happen, non-linear development outside the existing boundaries. And I think it's also a fact that this is the sort of development that the neighbourhood plan said it wanted. I remember at the time when it came before us that I had issues with the neighbourhood plan, because it said didn't want any social housing, didn't want any flats, as I recall, and that went through and is enshrined in the neighbourhood plan. Didn't strike a chord with me, that particular desire, but they were very firm that they wanted to see smaller dwellings for the reasons that the report outlined, to help sustain the future of the whole village. So I think on that sort of evidence, the box, as far as I'm concerned, is ticked. And then we've got the appeal decision on the other 3 dwellings. These are in a similar sort of location, outside and adjacent to the village envelope. The inspector was clear about that, and approved, gave planning permission. So a lot of what the inspector concluded in his report, I think you can roll over to this application, and the same sort of arguments would be fed back to us at appeal. So I'm inclined, I think, to support this application. There are a couple of other points. There is the element of previously developed land, so it is in part brownfield land, and of course there is no objection from highways on any count.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I largely agree with Councillor Mann's comments. I remember this neighbourhood plan bringing it to full council, because I think I'm right in saying it was the first one that we in this district, first neighbourhood plan to be completed, and it doesn't appear to me to be contrary to Policy 7 in the neighbourhood plan as it's currently worded. So I would endorse Councillor Mann's comments on that. No, the site isn't allocated for development, but we do have to take into account the previous appeal decision and the inspector's quite clear and firm view when he looked at that he saw no reason why there should not be development of 3 homes on the adjacent site, and I think that is relevant to this application. The one thing that did strike me about this when I read the agenda, the question I had was over the ownership of the highway access, which Mrs. Webb mentioned this evening, and then the agent. But I think Katie has clarified that it's residents have been written to, have been contacted, and if they don't wish to allow access, it's a civil matter. Am I right in thinking out it's not something that the planning committee can be involved with? It is going to be up to them and in conversations with the developer as to where they decide to go. So, taking all that into account, did Councillor Mann move? Has anybody moved anything? All right. Well, I think bearing all that in mind, then I will move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Did it find a second then, anyway? No. Thank you. Does any Councillor Mrs. Sparker?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think one of the main concerns that the issues that the residents are concerned about, and I completely understand why, is the narrowness of Rectory Meadow and the corners and the fact that the single track and parking and so on, and can completely understand why that would be a concern. But the problem for us, I think, is that appeal decision, which is the houses on that development will be using the same bit of road, and it wasn't a concern for the inspector. So I'm afraid I don't think that can be a legitimate concern for us either. I think the main thing for me is really how does this comply with the neighbourhood plan? I think when I first read Policy 7, my immediate response was that this did comply with Policy 7, the exception in Policy 7, in that it talks about settlements or developments which are adjacent to the existing settlement and not a linear extension of one of the roads, and Rectory Meadow being one of the roads. Well, it's a linear extension of the village, like that, sorry, read that correctly, along one of the roads. I wouldn't describe this as a linear extension of the village, although I do acknowledge that one of the roads that is mentioned is Rectory Meadow. So there is some ambiguity there, although I agree with my colleagues that I don't think this is caught by the exception in Policy 7, but this is in some ways a problem we have when we have individual neighbourhood plans, all with different wording, some of which is not as clear as it might be. So, but that is my interpretation of it. I do have a bit more of a concern about the other policy about the priority habitat, actually, because the woodland which surrounds this gravel pit is a priority habitat, and I was just trying to flick through the agenda to find the wording in the neighbourhood plan about the priority habitat. And I mean, a bit like Councillor Abbott, I was sort of wondering, well, where are these trees? And I did go through the arboricultural report, and I think the trees the access road will require removal of 3 groups of trees and two individual trees to create the access roads. So that presumably is part of this priority habitat, although it's not particularly clear from the neighbourhood plan in the neighbourhood plan. So I just was wondering whether the officer could comment, please, on that aspect of the neighbourhood plan.
I mean, all I could say really is that the application has been considered by our ecology team. The application was supported by preliminary assessments, and they have raised no objection. So it would be difficult for us to justify going a different direction to the advice that they're giving us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's just whether this was complying with the policy on protecting the priority habitat if you're cutting down trees for it. But I suppose the point you're making is that that if you cut down those trees and those groups of trees, you're not affecting the priority habitat. I suppose that's the point you're making. I mean, the other point that I was going to make was about the access, but I think that has been answered and is clarified for me. There is no access unless the residents agree, so that's an issue for the developer. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wrench.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think Mrs Webb spoke very well at public question time, and I agree with Mrs Councillor Parker there, where she says that the access seems to be quite clarified. The point that also Councillor Parker raised, I also feel that it does seem to be adjacent, but I was just wondering if, Katie, you'd be able to bring up the site location plan on your slide, and if possible, just to give some clarification or an example of what would mean linear development compared to the adjacent development, just to give some absolute clarity on that, because it's a bit ambiguous at the moment, and I'd like to give an example of what the linear development may have looked like if it did not meet that criteria. Thank you.
Yeah. My interpretation of linear would be as in like a ribbon along the road. So, for example, if it started here and then you had, one by one that followed the road round, This is more like a enclave or a group of housing. It doesn't follow the road, which is what a linear fashion would be.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to raise or mention any other? I think Councillor Abbott.
It's been moved and seconded. Our officers agreeing we can have some form of wording to strengthen the construction access issue.
Yes. It has been moved by Councillor Mrs Spray and seconded by Councillor Mann with the additional condition regarding the construction traffic requirement notice or agreement with officers. All those in favour? Those against? One against. So that application has been granted. Thank you very much indeed, members. We now come on to application 5B, application 21024494 full, Halstead Hall, Braintree Road, Winstead Green. This application can be found on pages 53 to 133. I do have speakers on this application. The first person that wishes to make a statement is Councillor Paul Foster. He is the chairman of Winstead Green and Halstead Rural Parish, and he is present with us this evening. Good evening, Councillor Foster.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you. The Parish Council was initially supportive of this application when we were consulted in August last year. So why is the Parish Council now objecting to the scheme? Well, firstly, the description of the proposed development before you is, as submitted in August 2021, a 25-bed dementia unit and the erection of 20 bungalows. There's no mention of any houses. Yet the scheme is materially different to that which is before you tonight. It's changed from 20 bungalows to 14 houses and 6 bungalows, and it's unclear why officers have decided not to ask the applicant to reapply, so the description of the development is incorrect and misleading. Secondly, the site is unallocated in both the adopted local plan and in the emerging Section 2 plan. The fact that the council can now demonstrate it has a 5-year housing land supply means that the tilted balance no longer applies. Sites which are proposed to be allocated within Section 2 will become adopted allocations and significantly boost the council's 5-year land supply. And as members will recall, they voted to refuse planning permission last month for 200 houses at Bournebridge Hill, Halstead, on the grounds that the council can now demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The proposed 20 residential units are therefore contrary to both the MPPF and the development plan. If the council is to be consistent in its approach to unallocated sites in the countryside, then it needs to refuse this application for the same reason as the Bournebridge application. In the planning balance, officers have incorrectly given significant weight to the provision of 6 affordable units, but only moderate weight to a conflict with the development plan. It should be the opposite. The principle of residential development on this site is contrary to policy and should be given significant, not moderate weight. Thirdly, this application comprises 2 distinct elements, the dementia care unit and the 20 dwellings, and they're not linked. The need for more dementia care is abundantly clear, as Care England has stated in its response. Yet there's no guarantee whatsoever that the dementia units will be built. Members should give very significant weight to the statement by your officers of paragraph 14.3.4. The applicant can choose never to implement the dementia unit, yet they're free to build 20 dwellings for profit. Fourthly, the proposed legal agreement makes no provision for any financial contribution towards Greenstead Green and Halstead Rural Parish. The parish has an open spaces plan which sets out where Section 106 money should be directed. Council officers have disregarded this. Finally, we are concerned about the removal of 64 trees and 11 groups of trees, which will be lost as a result of the development. 50 of these trees are to be removed due to poor condition. As officers state, most of the trees on the site are not managed, with many trees dead and dying, and most in need of basic crown pruning maintenance works. The applicant has failed to carry out even basic management of its own estate. This should be given significant weight in arriving at a decision in respect of tree management. So in summary, Chairman, we're asking members to refuse this application for the same reason as the Bournebridge Hill application. The harm arising from the conflict with the development plan outweighs the stated benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. The next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor Mrs. Jackie Bell. She's speaking on behalf of Halstead Town Council. Good evening, Councillor.
Good evening, members. And as the chairman has said, I am a district councillor, but I am here tonight representing Halstead Town Council. Halstead Town Council proposed a strong objection to this development, apart from the dementia unit, for the following reasons. Once again, this application is not within the Halstead area, but is within the boundaries of Grinster Green and Halstead Rural Parish. But those who live on the development would have no option but to use the already overloaded infrastructure of Halstead, it being the closest to town. The egress from the site onto the main road gives cause for concern. Visibility of oncoming traffic is poor, and there has been a previous fatal accident in this area as little ago as 2 years ago. The 5-year housing supply figure has already been achieved, and yet development is continuing, in spite of the fact also that the 20 dwellings were not in the draft local plan. Concerns were raised about Halstead being unable to cope with further residents who, although they were outside the boundary development, would still depend on Halstead's infrastructure, in particular the already overloaded doctor's surgery. This development is also planned in the open countryside as a separate settlement not linked to the town. While the dementia unit might well be needed, it does not need to entail, in addition, the commercial development of 20 residential properties. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Pell. That brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement on this application, so we're now going to the presentation, which is going to be made by Melanie. Good evening, and thank you, Melanie.
Good evening, members. The application before you this evening is in two parts. You have the demolition of existing outbuildings, the extension and refurbishment of an existing redundant building on the site to form a 25-bed dementia unit, and then the erection of bin and cycle stores associated with that, and then the erection of 20 bungalows. I will just point out that that was an administrative error on my part. When the application was amended partway through, it should have been changed to 20 dwellings rather than bungalows, so I do apologise for that error. And then along with associated layout, car parking, drainage and landscaping. And the site is Halstead Hall on Braintree Road. So this first slide is the site location plan. It looks better on my screen than yours. I do apologise. I wonder if we can turn the lights down a bit more. I have to ask you to do it because it looks a bit technical, that light switch. Any better? Shows it up a little bit better. So the application site is ringed in red. So to the north of the site here, we've got Halstead Hall, the existing care home on the site. And then to the left-hand side here, this is the property known as Green Lodge that's referred to within the committee report. And then the land in blue is other land owned by the applicant. And then you can see here to the right-hand side of the slide, this is the existing development on the Oak Road site. This is the Blaw's home portion of the site. And we can make out this road here is Marler Road, and then we've got Hurrell Close here, and then Oak Road is just off the page up here. To the south is, or running directly to the right-hand side, of the application site, is the A131, which runs to Halstead in one direction and Braintree in the other. This next slide shows a site plan of the proposals. So taking the works to a Green Lodge, so you can make out here is the existing footprint of Green Lodge. It's broadly an L shape, and then there are proposed extensions that will close in the building and then create a courtyard within the middle. We have 2 areas of new car parking, and then within the more open portion of the site, as I say, during the life of the application, the number of dwellings that were proposed in this portion of the site has been reduced from 30 to 20, with some other amendments to layout. But this has meant that all back-to-back distances now called with the development, with the Essex Design Guide. All properties have the relevant amount of private garden space and off-street car parking. So the next two slides show different site accesses. So the first one is the site access onto the site from Russell's Road, and the relevant visibility displays are shown on here, and highways have been satisfied. They were satisfied with the access arrangements here. They also raised concerns about the additional capacity at the access for between Russell's Road and the A131, and again, visibility displays were demonstrated by the applicant to show that vehicles could exit Russell's Road in a safe fashion. The next few slides show details of the proposed dwellings. So we've got floor plans of 4 of the dwellings here, 2, 3, 11 and 12. So this is 2 pairs of semi-detached properties. And then we have some elevations there. So these ones are bungalows. The next slide, these are larger bungalows, plots 6 and 7. And again, the relevant elevations. The next slides show the floor plans for the 1.5 storey properties. So this is plots 1, 9, 10 and 13. So we can see they're 3-bedroom properties. And then we've got the corresponding elevations. These are the largest properties on the site. Again, 1.5 storey. And the corresponding elevations. And this is a pair of houses, properties 17 and 18. So these are 2-bedroom, 1.5 storey properties. And the corresponding elevations there. Turning to the plans that we have for Green Lodge, these show the existing floor plans and elevations. It's broadly an L-shaped building at the moment, and as I mentioned earlier on that slide, the proposal is to create a square and then the courtyard garden within. So the area marked pink is the new extension, which will join up that final corner of the building. And then there are various internal arrangement changes to create the bedrooms and other accommodation required within the building. The first floor looks fairly similar in terms of you have the wraparound extension that joins the 2 corners of the existing building. This next slide shows the front elevation, which will broadly stay the same, and then we've got the 2 side elevations, and then this new rear elevation, which joins up the 2 corners of the building. The next slides show photographs of the portion of the site where the houses or the dwellings are proposed. So this photograph here is looking along the view of the site with Russell's Road behind this line of trees, and on the left-hand side here behind these trees is the A131 going into Houstead in one direction and Braintree the other. That's a closer photograph of the existing boundary that runs to the front of the site where it bounds the A131. Unfortunately, it was a sunny day, so you can't actually make out much through the trees, but the road is there beyond those trees. This is turning, looking further into the site, looking westwards. Russell's Road runs along here behind these trees, and then the care home itself, the existing care home, is kind of over my right-hand shoulder, over this side here, beyond another tree line. This is looking northwest. So again, the Russell's Road is now out of view, and behind this large tree here is the tree line that separates the application site, or separates the application site from the area of the site which is currently used by the care home. This is a photograph taken from inside the site, but looking out through the main entrance onto the A131. And you can just make out the new properties in the Oak Road development. So this is the access that will continue to be used to serve both the existing care home and the dementia care home at the back of the site. Beyond this tree line here is the part of the site that would accommodate the 20 dwellings, and this portion of the site is where one of the parking areas is proposed. The next few photographs show images of Green Lodge in a fairly poor state, unfortunately. So these photographs here, I'm standing in the quadrangle that would form the central garden, and behind where I'm standing would be the extension that links the two corners. And the same in here. These are taken a fair while ago, so it may well be slightly more overgrown now. So moving on to the heads of terms, there are a number. So we have affordable housing, 30% on the site, and then there are financial contributions towards open space projects. There's also on-site open space management plan. There's a financial contribution towards the recruitment of additional clinical staff to increase capacity at the Elizabeth Coulthard surgery. We have the RAMS contribution, and then there are financial contributions towards early years and childcare and library enhancements. So moving on to the summary. As outlined within the officer report, the site lies outside the town boundary of Howstead and in the countryside. No objection is raised to the redevelopment of Green Lodge to create the 25-bed specialist dementia care unit. A degree of harm would inevitably be caused to the character of the landscape as a result of the change of use in the site. However, the planning inspector previously concluded that development of the site would not result in a material harm to the wider landscape character of the area. Therefore, it's considered that the proposals would not result in an unacceptable impact upon the character and appearance of the area. Thus, the conflict with policies CS8 and RLP 80 is attributed limited weight. The planning inspector did not rule out the use of the site for residential purposes, and the appeal was dismissed by way of applying the tilted balance. The council can currently demonstrate a 5-year land supply, albeit marginally, and the need to maintain this supply. And there is a need to maintain this supply. In light of the planning inspector's previous conclusions, and given the adverse impacts previously identified by the inspector have now been overcome, it's considered that when applying the flat planning balance, it is recommended that planning permission is granted for the proposal. This is against the context only of moderate weight being given to the conflict with RLP2, and given that the proposal does not wholly conflict with CS5 of the core strategy, given that the inspector did not rule out the site for residential purposes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you very much indeed. Members, I could just about see you all.
Oh, should I turn that back up?
A little bit, please. It would help. I think it might help me a bit. Councillor Radley. Monday, sorry. See, I can't see your name.
I was going to say, Councillor Radley is definitely not here this evening.
No, so sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first and foremost, I do have a question that the one of the speakers brought up, and that is about the permission to grant the dementia care unit, but there's no weight given to the district council actually making that proposal come to any fruition. So, for instance, this is saying that we could grant a 25-bed dementia care unit, but it could be built, may not be built. I don't understand where our authority can grant something but not actually have any reflection to make it come to fruition, and therefore why are we even considering it. Secondly, again, this does sit outside of Halstead. It is in Grinstead Green Rural, yet sadly, yet again, we're seeing Halstead's infrastructure, overloaded as it is, being burdened with yet another 20 dwellings, and we can't take the pressure on the following application. There's a further number of homes, and in that application, it states that that particular surgery that we have cannot substantiate any further people within it. So from that, I can't support this application for those reasons. And sadly, for this application, there is no statutory authority that is against it, and the appeal from the inspector, the wording that's already come up in the summary, doesn't lend weight to any kind of refusal this evening. So unfortunately, I can't propose its refusal because I've tried that on many occasions, and I'll sit here on my own and not even be supported. But I'm certainly not going to support this application for the fact that it does go against the planning authority, and the fact that we did this at Bournebridge Hill and refused the application. So.
Thank you, Councillor Monday. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to, if I may, just go to the officer and just ask a question before I actually make a few comments. We've had an email in this afternoon which relates to this site. Are the town and parish councils aware of it? Could you just talk us through that bit? Yeah, I've not had any. I've not received an email. I've had an email in. Am I looking at the right one?
Came from officers.
Yeah. Is it relating to this site, and we're looking at the wrong application? Is it another application?
I didn't send anything today unless someone pertaining to me.
Is it the member updates?
North of Oak Road. That's a different one. Fine. That's absolutely fine. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're making me hard.
No, it's like I read it and I just wanted to just make sure I was understanding it.
Someone's logging in as me and sending emails.
No, it's fine. I should have put that in another capacity. Thank you. But actually, it's quite helpful because it's in the same location as well, so it's makes one think a bit. And just on that, if I may, we spoke this evening. It wasn't a particularly good map actually, and it showed Marla Road, and I think there was the other road that goes in as well. Am I correct in saying that was an overdevelopment? That wasn't an allocated site when that was built out. Is that correct?
The Oak site.
The Bloor Home site, I don't think that was allocated, was it? So I think we need to be quite mindful in terms of context when we talk about additional homes in this area, that we've already had additional homes in this area. I haven't got that planning application in front of me, but we must be talking about 100 odd homes actually that were built there. So I'm a little bit frustrated to see even more homes being built now when we've already had that big estate built out as overdevelopment in the first place. I also, as previously said in Public Gallery, that the site is in a rural location. I'm always mindful that the Parish Council is Grinstead Green and Halstead Rural Parish Council, and that, you know, this site again does sit in this village, and that it's an overdevelopment of this village, and I can't see anywhere in the proposals that Grinstead Green and Halstead Rural Parish Council are going to get any benefits from it, really. I also wanted to bring up the point, I brought it up in the previous application on the 200 homes that were proposed, when I said I just didn't think it fitted in with that sort of rural countryside setting. And when one drives along Russell's Road, you know, one is really mindful that you are in the countryside, and, you know, if it was just the actual dementia care home itself and the restoration of a building that was already there, Completely get that, and I would support that, and I feel that the Town Council and the Parish Council have also sort of said the same, but this is overdevelopment. That land could be better served, actually, to be kept as more of a rewilding area to really help those people that are going to be living in that dementia home. I'm also very mindful that we've got spare beds at Houston Lodge that have cared for many local residents with all sorts of different types of end-of-life illnesses. That's now closed, and we've got all those beds sitting empty. And we recently had a care home that closed just on the boundary of Owlscombe / Colingane, and we've lost care beds there. So, and I previously brought this up at a full council meeting. Personally, I would have preferred to have seen this site with a restoration of the dementia / care home, with bungalows that are actually linked to it that could serve the older population that we have in our district. So on those grounds alone, and grounds that have previously been mentioned about, you know, we now have our housing number. I don't know, because I haven't got the figures in front of me, whether the development at Law Homes helped ultimately to get us to that number. You know, it wasn't allocated, so I think House should have done their fair share of this. I just feel that it's, you know, in summary of all of that, it's overdevelopment in a rural setting. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't be supporting officers' recommendations, and I would either move or support to refuse the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Beavers. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I first of all ask the officer first of all question and then make some comments? The question really is, why are we able to put any kind of condition which would link the development of the dwellings to the refurbishment and the creation of the dementia unit?
No, unfortunately, a condition along those lines wouldn't meet the various tests that we're required to carry out to test on whether conditions are relevant, appropriate, and a condition requiring one form of development to not be built until another has been built just wouldn't pass those tests, unfortunately. So I think that also answers slightly your question, Councillor Monday. I didn't come back on that one. It would be difficult to, you wouldn't be able to impose a condition. It would be like a Grampian style condition. You might have heard that wording before, where it's a negatively worded condition, and it's not something that we would be able to impose. So that's why it's set out as it is within the officer report. That would be the same for any development. You know, even if you know, I got my listed building consent for windows and doors. Hasn't happened yet because there's been a delay on wood, but it doesn't mean that you have to then implement permission. You know, whether it's for 5 houses, windows and doors, or 20 houses, permission can be granted, but local authority can't require you to implement that permission. As I say, there's some rare occasions where you can do that, but in this case, that's not something that we've explored, just because a condition wouldn't meet those tests.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for that answer. That's clarified that point for me. I mean, I think we mustn't forget that this is an application for a 25-bed dementia unit, and there's clear evidence within the report that it's much needed in the district. It also provides for the restoration of an historic building. I actually read through quite a lot of the design and access state document, which was pretty interesting actually, about the history of the building. In fact, the top floor, and for those who didn't look at it, was originally a ballroom, believe it or not, which would be converted to become a sort of a recreational sort of social area for the residents. I actually was very impressed with the whole design of Green Lodge and what is being proposed. The design will, I think, create a very suitable living conditions for people who are suffering with that condition, with an fully enclosed courtyard, providing safe access to outside space, but at the same time respecting the historic nature of the building and really enhancing what was there. And when you look at the photographs, as you've shown on today in the presentation, and the what was photographs in design and access, I mean, it's in a terrible state. It's going to cost, I imagine, a lot of money to put it right. So I think there are definitely two, quite substantial benefits to that aspect of the scheme, both the restoration of this building, which is an integral part really of Housestead Hall in itself, and also the provision of the dementia unit. As regards the dwellings themselves, I mean, I do know what the inspector said about I think we must take note of the inspector's comment that dwellings on that bit of land will not harm the wider landscape, possibly in a way that we didn't feel with brought home the other application the other night was the case. It is much more contained with the existing trees. I think the design of the dwellings is very appropriate to the buildings that are already on the site and to the countryside setting, fully compliant with gardens and parking and so on. I mean, the only issue really is the fact that we have this 5-year supply, although it's contrary to the development plan. But as it's been mentioned before, it is very tenuous. So I do not think there are good enough reasons to refuse this application, and I would support the officer's recommendation, and I will move that, Madam Chairman.
You're moving it, Councillor. Mrs. Peters, thank you. Does it find a seconder before I move on, please? Okay, that's in two places. I've got Councillor Mann wishing to speak next, and I'll come back to you with Councillor Mrs. Spray and Councillor Swear. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Applications are often not what we would like to see, but we nevertheless have to come to a conclusion about what we're presented. And again, we've got the ghost of an inspector's decision hanging over this site, because the inspectors basically shot one of our foxes, in that we frequently use as a defence that development would result in material harm to the wider landscape character of the area. And Inspector here says that would not occur, so we couldn't use what is usually our number one argument for refusal in a rural location like this. And significantly, because you have to read inspectors' reports very carefully, he didn't rule out the site for housing, and that is quite a key point. He did turn the previous application down. Design and layout, lack of affordable housing, and ecology concerns. Those were the three sort of main reasons. But the applicant's been fairly careful to address those issues in this revised application. The number of dwellings is reduced from 30 to 20, and they're now outward facing and not inward facing, which the inspector previously objected to. The affordable housing is now there. It's not argued that it's sort of an enabling application dementia home. It's sort of standalone, so there's 30% affordable housing on offer, and there are also some addressing of specific ecology concerns from the previous decision. So I think that logically we're drawn to supporting this application, however palatable it might be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. My only concern with the inspector was I'm sure he didn't realise which authority we were. He refers to us as Waverley in part of the a report, which I thought was rather poor. Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, Councillor Mann has once again very nicely summed up pretty much what I was going to say. I do have a great deal of sympathy with Councillor Mrs Pell's comments in her statement, and also with Councillor Monday's reservations about this in terms of the impact that the additional housing will have on the infrastructure in Halstead, because that's where people will go. But it's not, of course, the development actually doesn't fall within Halstead town, and I'm not unsympathetic towards that at all. As far as the dementia unit is concerned, if this is approved this evening, I sincerely hope that it does come about. It's a much needed facility. I agree with Councillor Mrs Parker that it looks good. I think the design is really good. But of course we can't in any way, in planning terms, compel it to come about. I think we can only hope that it does. But we do have the previous appeal decision, which has to be given significant weight. As Councillor Mann said, there were 3 very clear reasons why the inspector refused it, and those reasons have been overcome. And he did say, I have found that the proposal would not result in material harm to the wider landscape character of the area. So the argument for refusing this on grounds that it would adversely impact the local area in terms of landscape, or that it's overdevelopment, will fall on stony ground in front of another inspector, I'm afraid, because we have a very clear statement from that inspector that he feels the site is suitable for residential purposes. So, yeah, we are, if we were minded to refuse it, we are really quite hamstrung by a previous appeal decision. But many of in fact, all of those reasons for refusal have been overcome. And in terms of the dementia unit, as I say, I just hope it does come about if we approve this evening. So I'm on those grounds happy to support the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I think colleagues have made quite a lot of relevant points tonight, especially Councillor Monday about the dementia unit being built and linked to planning, and the officer answered that well. That was one of my real concerns as well. That said, as Councillor Manns mentioned about the ghost of the inspector's decision is playing on the back of my mind as well. The fact that there's going to be potentially no harm to the countryside in their views. What I would like to see, though, is certainly some of the Section 106 money is certainly going to Greens to Green and Rural Council, because I think that's really important as it falls under that parish. I'm also concerned a little bit about the infrastructure and house that has been raised. But again, I agree with Councillor Parker and the fact about the historic building being used in this way for a much needed facility. So overall in balance, I think this is okay. The only thing that I would like to ask officers, is there any way that we could add additional planting to Russell's Road, because I noticed from the photographs actually, and in the wintertime, that is actually quite open to view, and is that have the ability to completely thicken up or replant another hedgerow on the inside of that to cushion and give a better winter environment as well as the summer one to screen that.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Do you want to respond before I move on to Councillor Abbott?
Yes, so the point in about you wanting the Section 106 contribution to go towards Greenstead Green and Howstead Rural, myself and Neil did actually have quite a lengthy discussion about where to, because you have to then link it to a project within the action plan. And given the location of the site, although it sits within Greenstead Green and rural Howstead Parish, any residents on there, we took the view that they would use open space located within Howstead town centre, and that's why within the heads of terms, Howstead Trinity Ward was mentioned rather than Greenstead Green, just because of its proximity and the likely usage of residents within that new portion of the site. In terms of the hedgerow screening, I just want to double check what conditions we've suggested. Sorry. So if you turn to page 110 of the agenda, so you'll notice if you've looked through there, we've sort of split the decision notice into a few different parts because of the development kind of being in two halves. So condition 20 is in the section for conditions relating to the 20 dwellings only, and condition 20 does require a scheme of landscaping to be submitted, and so when that scheme does come forward to us through a discharge of condition application, we can ensure that the boundary treatment, particularly to the road elevations, both the A131 and Russell's Road, can be beefed up, so to speak. I know that there was a fair amount of scrub within there that had been cleared a few years ago, but I think something that's a bit more manageable can be put back in its place, and that can be dealt with quite easily under that condition.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the starting point for this is it is an unallocated site in the countryside, and I think we've got to be cautious about reading too fine a detail in what inspectors have said, just as much as Councillor Mann makes the correct point. We have to try and interpret what they say, because things have moved on. That original application in 2018 was 4 years ago nearly, and the inspector's decision was 2 years ago. Since then, our new local plan has moved to the point where we can give it some weight. Hopefully, we're going to adopt it soon, if the current inspectors decide to give us some of their time. Yeah. And things have changed in other respects. For example, I noticed one little detail. The inspector said that, yes, there are incomplete footways from the site, but access is possible along 76 metres of verge. Well, I don't know if that's still the case for this application, but obviously now we have the wildflower programme for verges, which means the verges are only cut once a year. So for substantial periods in the summer, they'll be long and not actually very walkable. And do we want people trampling all over the wildflowers? So, things have moved on in a number of respects, and I don't think we can just assume another inspector now, if we refuse this, would judge it on all exactly the same points. I think the concerns raised by Councillors Pell and Monday are absolutely right, and as members will know, I keep making very similar issues around the villages around Witham and Witham itself. And here we are again, with the NHS is saying that the relevant GP practice would not be able to take the additional patients. It's described as unsustainable, but hey presto, we're going to solve that with £20,000. And on it goes, application after application. It is ridiculous. Now, I don't blame BDC entirely. Officer Mr Jones has made the same point many, many times, that the NHS requires us to do this and the system puts us in this position. But between the two, or the three, Essex County Council, BDC and the NHS, we've surely got to come up with a better system that actually delivers what is required to support additional residents. I made the same comment as I made on the previous application about loss of trees. We don't have a clear picture from this report of the losses, the species, and where they are on the site. And, you know, I make the same request again, can we have that for future applications? It would be really, really helpful. And like other members, I'll often spend 2 hours in the afternoon diving into the tree reports to try and work it out. And I don't mind doing that, but it would be helpful, I think, for us and members of the public if we had that clear. And from what I can read into this so far, the loss of the trees will be quite substantial. A lot of the losses are again described as poor or dying trees, but that level of detail is not that clear to us. I do very much agree about the concerns about there being no contribution to the parish council in which the development is located. In terms of Green Screen and House of Rural Parish Council, I take the point officers make that identifying something relatively close to the site was not easy, but I'm going to mention Rivenall, where a piece of public access open space was right next to a site, and yet still the contribution went to Whittam. So I'm glad officers are looking at it, and that's something we need to keep doing. You know, how can we get some money to the local parish council for a development? In this case, I think that possibly the correct decisions have been made because of the proximity issue. Inspector previously cited protected species on the site as a reason for him not agreeing to allowing it through. Bats. I know more work's been done on that, but this application doesn't appear to have a lighting condition on it. So there's a substantial amount of development in a bat environment. So I would urge that we have that in there, because that should be pretty standard for something in the countryside like this. But for all those reasons, Madam Chairman, I find I can't support this. The bit I could support is the Green Lodge. I agree. I think that's been very well done. I love the idea of the green courtyard in the middle and rebuilding it. But it seems too big a price to pay to plump quite a substantial amount of housing in the countryside on an unallocated site. Thank you.
Thank you. Would it be possible to have a lighting condition, Melanie, please? Yeah?
Yes, that'd be fine. I thought one had been included, but apologies that it hasn't.
Yes, Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Just a very quick question, Madam Chairman, on the conditions. I noticed that on page 65 talks about paragraph 7.8.3, historic building record requested. The only condition I could find was on page 108, condition 14, which relates to archaeological investigation, but I couldn't find a condition about a building, completing a building record prior to the restoration. Is that in there? Thank you.
I think the building record would be covered by the archaeological condition, because what would usually happen is with an archaeology condition, I haven't read that one, but what you'd usually do is you'd have a written scheme of investigation agreed with the County Council's Historic Buildings Officer. So they would specify what the archaeologist or the specialist doing the work on the site would need to do. So in this case, they would be specifying we would want a historic building record to cover such and such a buildings. So it would be picked up by that condition. Although it doesn't explicitly state it, it would be covered. So I think we're okay there.
Councillor Swear.
Madam Chairman, can I just quickly check with officers that because of the new potential, should the planning application go through with regards to car charging points for the buildings in the future then? Because I believe it's now standard, is that correct?
I thought that's become standard with the government, isn't it?
We can add a condition on to that effect, similar to the ones that have previously gone in last few cycles.
Anyone else wish to add anything new or further? It has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Parker and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Spray with an additional lighting condition and the vehicle charging points. All those in favour? Those against? That application has been granted. Thank you, members. And now brings us on to next application, which is application 5C. Application 21031014 full, land north of Oak Road, Halstead. This can be found on pages 134 to 189, and I do have speakers on this application, and they are all in the chamber with us this evening. Councillor Paul Foster from Winster Green and Halstead Rural wishes to speak again. Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chairman. Winster Green and Halstead Rural Parish Council acknowledges that the principle of residential development has been accepted on this site, which lies just within Halstead Town Council's area. Nevertheless, we have two concerns about this development. Firstly, we wish to express our concern about the impact of generated traffic upon Oak Road, Letches Lane and Tidings Hill. These roads are likely to become considerably busier and more congested when this development is fully occupied. Officers state that future residents will have a variety of options, such as walking and public transport. The site is 1.3 kilometres from the nearest pharmacy, 1.6 kilometres from the nearest food store. So the reality is that most people will drive. The site is 1.2 kilometres from the nearest primary school and almost 2 kilometres to Ramsey Academy School. The development will generate 21 primary school aged children and 14 secondary school aged children. Again, the reality is that most parents will probably take their children to school by adding more traffic to these roads. The Parish Council therefore questions officers' views that this is a sustainable location with access to services and facilities within easy reach of walking. Secondly, the Parish Council is concerned that the landscape master plan that accompanies the planning application makes very little provision for new trees and hedgerows along the southern edge of the site with Oak Road. This will form the new boundary between the southern urban edge of Halstead and the rural countryside. The landscape and visual assessment that accompanies the planning application doesn't refer to views into the site from the south along Tidings Hill. The photo viewpoints in the addendum to the LVA, notably viewpoint 5 from public footpath 8821 and photo viewpoint 7 from public footpath 8822, shows that there are significant gaps in the existing intervening tree cover. Moreover, the photographs were all taken in May 2018, when trees and hedgerows were in full leaf. There's no recognition in either the LVA or the addendum that there will be greater landscape intrusion into the rural countryside from this development during the winter months, when viewed from the public rights of way network to the south. And this isn't referred to in your officer's report. So we therefore ask that a new condition is added to the recommended list of conditions, requiring the applicant submit a detailed landscape mitigation scheme prior to commencement of development, which specifically addresses how the impacts of the development will be mitigated with additional landscaping along the southern edge of the site. This should include photo viewpoints taken during the winter, when the site is more exposed to views from the south. And the Parish Council would wish to be consulted on this draft scheme so that our views are taken into account by officers.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Foster. Next person wishing to make a statement on this application is Councillor Mrs. Jackie Pell, who's representing House of Town Council. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. Halstead Town Council would draw the attention of the Planning Committee to the letter of representation already provided to you. Halstead Town Council proposes a strong objection to this application on the following grounds. Over the past few years, the infrastructure of Halstead Town, the schools, the roads and parking and the doctor's surgery have become increasingly overwhelmed by the constant push by developers to build new housing on the outer edges of the town. Some of these developments are not within the town boundaries, but those who live there are necessarily dependent on the town for all their needs. It appears for some time to Halstead Town Council that Essex County Council's Highways Department is not fit for purpose, and it now appears that the planning department also has no concern for the town by allowing uncontrolled development to swamp what was nice, once a pleasant place to live. An application was made 5 years ago for Oak Road to be classified as a quiet lane, as it is a single-track road used by many for exercise, as is Leach's Lane. Both are unsuitable for through traffic. The developments in the vicinity of Oak Road have meant that Oak Road is increasingly used as a rat run, with totally unsuitable vehicles and volumes of traffic passing through. The approach roads for the development cannot cope with either the traffic generated by the building work or the increased volume of cars resulting from the new houses. The application does not provide good connections to the main road. Oak Road, Leach's Lane and Tidings Hill being far too narrow, and in fact a sign has now gone up very recently to say road narrows on Tidings Hill, would bring increased dangers to pedestrians and other road users. Developers once again show their lack of concern for the local environment. As with other similar developments in Halstead, flooding is a concern, as developers are paying little attention to centuries-old watercourses, which will eventually find their way through the development. Although the 5-year housing supply has already been reached, the number of houses to be built on this development has increased from 70 to 80. The parking supply with the plans is not sufficient for the number of cars to be expected nowadays for each house. Halstead is a rural town set in agricultural land and beautiful countryside, but the development's now encroaching on the green space, no concessions to its preservation. Just today, I travelled down Tidings Hill from my home. Down on the hill was 2 trucks, not lorries, parked outside somebody's house because they was doing some work to that house, and a car, which meant you couldn't see beyond them. As I was travelling down, people couldn't see what was coming on the way up. As I went down, something came up and I had cars behind me, which meant I couldn't reverse up the hill, and the same to the people coming up the other way. I had to drive on the pavement, which is illegal, to allow traffic to be able to move. That is not on, and it will just get worse. And there's no plan to stop any of the lorries going down there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. The final person wishing to make a statement this evening is Mr. Olivia Spencer from Andrew Martin Planning, and he is the agent. Good evening.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Olivier Spencer from Andrew Martin Planning, and I represent Bellway Homes. As you may recall, the land north of Oak Road, Halstead, already benefits from an outline planning permission for 70 dwellings and has since been allocated for housing in the emerging Section 2 local plan. Bellway purchased the site last year and held a series of meetings with the council's planning, urban design and landscape officers and the county council's highway officers to discuss the detailed layout and design of the development. These discussions culminated in the submission of a full planning application in October. The detailed proposals include 80 dwellings, 28 of which will be good quality affordable homes. This equates to 35% affordable, which exceeds the 30% requirement set out in Braintree's policy. The modest increase from 70 to 80 dwellings will ensure that the proposals make an efficient use of land and support a wider mix of dwellings on site. The new homes now comprise 1 and 2 bedroom masonettes, 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows, including wheelchair user properties, and 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. The proposals incorporate a formal children's play area with 11 pieces of play equipment and other areas of public open space on site. A total of 90 new trees are proposed, including 66 street trees alongside the new roads on site. This far exceeds the 26 street trees envisaged as part of the original outline permission. It also more than compensates for the proposals to facilitate the development and its new access. Numerous access options have been tested in order to minimise tree loss at the site entrance, while still providing a safe access that meets highway standards. The new pedestrian and vehicular access on Tidings Hill and the carefully planned carriageway widening will encourage new residents to head north via Tidings Hill and White Horse Avenue and away from the narrower Oak Road and Leach's Lane to the south. The design of the development draws on positive features identified in the town, including weatherboarding, encased render, stone windowsills, brick banding, and other detailing, as agreed with the Council's Urban Design Officer. Furthermore, Bellway is committed to reducing carbon emissions to a level that is 10% lower than building regulations, and their design approach contributes to reducing energy demand and using energy efficiently. Electric vehicle charging points will be provided for all homes, along with superfast fibre broadband. The application also includes approximately £600,000 in planning contributions towards enhanced local facilities, including outdoor sport, allotments, early years and primary education, expanded capacity at the Elizabeth Courtauld Surgery, improvements to Housestead Library and community facilities in the town. Finally, the Council's officers have seen fit to recommend the scheme for approval. With this in mind, I respectfully request that members follow this advice and grant consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. That brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement. We'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Neil. Good evening, Neil, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. So this is an application, this is a full application for the erection of 80 dwellings, along with associated public open space, play, access and sustainable drainage on land north of Oak Road in Housestead. So this is the application site. So just for bearings, Oak Road runs along the south boundary of the site. This is Tidings Hill, which Councillor Pell referred to. This is where vehicular access will be formed from. And then, and then you can see the existing edge of the town. So we've got Coney's Road and Grange Close just to the north. This is farmland further to the east on the other side of Tidings Hill and to the south of Oak Road. Oak House here is a residential property which has also got a spa building at the back, so business running from there. And then this is a field, undeveloped field to the west here. So the site location, the site is on the southern edge of Housestead. So you can see there what the plan doesn't pick up, perhaps, or this plan doesn't pick up, is the development on Oak Road, which I think Councillor Beavis mentioned earlier. So this was a scheme which was approved, it was obtained by Gladman, has been built out by Bloor and David Wilson. So that's sort of the town moving to the south already. This site, as you've seen from the report, has already got an outline permission. So usually what we would expect is an outline permission is granted and then a developer would come along with reserved matters. What's happened with this particular application is the applicant who's purchased the site following the grant of outline permission has looked at the site's capacity, felt that there was scope to increase the numbers to make efficient use of the site in an acceptable manner, and that's why full application has been made. So whilst we're certainly mindful of the outline permission that was granted previously, this is a full application with all details. We're not relying on the outline permission. This is the site plan. So again, just for bearings, so this is Oak House over here. This is the spa building just at the back here. There's quite a strong conifer hedge, tall conifer hedge running around the edge of the Oak House boundary. Got an existing hedge running along the southern boundary here. No vehicular access being proposed onto Oak Road. This is the vehicular access point here off Tidings Hill. There is an additional pedestrian connection which we're looking to form off the garage court off Grange Close, just to provide additional connectivity. And there's also potential for a connection to the west should that site come forward in the future. But this is the development, so you can see effectively two parcels, got a field boundary running down the middle here. So the road comes in, got parcel 1 here, it's a development, and then parcel 2 on the western side of the boundary. So just in terms of photographs, so this is the eastern field, so this is a couple of photos looking across. So this is stood sort of at the back of the properties on Grange Close, looking down across. This is where the connection will be formed, vehicular connection between the two fields. This is looking, stood in the bottom corner of the field, So just inside from the junction of Oak Road and Tidings Hill, looking back up. So these are the houses on Grange Close. And this is some photos of the western field, the larger field, which is parcel 2. So this is stood just inside the site off Oak Road, pretty much in the middle of the field, looking back up. So you can see we've got some 3-storey flats just along here, and then 2-storey housing along the rest of that northern boundary. And then if you stand in the same location, but looking to the west, this is looking down towards Oak House. And then some further photos. So this is stood at the top of the field now, so the northern sort of part of the field. So this is looking back towards parcel 1. So the eastern field, again with the gap there where the access will go through. And then this is looking to the west. So this is the existing boundary of that field to the west. And this is the conifer hedge, which I referred to at Oak House. Along the northern site boundary, it is mixed, quite open in places. So you can see this is the back of the apartments, of the flats. So you can see a sort of steel palisade fence there at the moment. Some of the properties do have fences, some more open from where previously the field wasn't being developed and where there was vegetation. And then this is just looking further along at the western site boundary. So you can see that conifer hedge that I was referring to, very tall and partly oversailing the boundary. That's the roof of the spa building at the back there. And then this is the western boundary. So this is the TPO tree at the end, which is being retained. And this will form part of an open space area, this group here. And then just in terms of surrounding context, these are some properties on Coney's Road. So this is the houses immediately to the north of the site. This is the access from Tidings Hill to Oak Road. So you can see narrow lane with vegetation on both sides. And just some more photos. This is what Councillor Pell was referring to and you heard about. So you can see this is the development boundary. So this is the hedge there on the left-hand side of these photos. And then the fields further to the south. And then this is flipping back over to Tidings Hill. So as you come out of the town, so this is just past Grange Close. Currently there's a national speed limit. This is the site just starting here. And these are the trees which run along the boundary at the moment. This is a photo taken slightly further along. So again, existing trees on the boundary. Another photo further along, Tidings Hill. And then this is past the sites. This is Oak Road here. This is looking back up. So again, existing trees along the boundary. Some trees on the eastern side of Tidings Hill, but not so many. There is a hedge there, which has been quite heavily cut back since we last looked at the site a few years ago, but with a ditch running through there, which has been dug out more recently as well. So talking through the development, so the layout plan in a little bit more detail. This is the first parcel. So vehicular entrance in here, pedestrian footway being formed up here. So rather than trying to get a footway along the edge of the road here, and potentially having more issues with retained trees, the footway will connect up to Grange Close up here, but it will then run into the site. So this is where the pedestrian access will come in. And you can see we've got 2 private drives coming off with houses arranged round. All the houses facing out, so you've got surveillance of the public open space areas around it, suds basin at the front, a play area just at the back here, and a pumping station here, although this isn't a foul pumping station, it's only for surface water, so we shouldn't have issues in terms of odour, but it is a respectful distance from properties, has been set back with cordon sanitaire, so we've got no concerns there. And parcel 2, as you run through, so this is the connection through that gap in the tree line. So houses facing out again over the open space and facing out around the suds basin here. And we've got a main street running through here. You can see trees on both sides of that road running through. And then we've got 2 lower order streets running down. Trees planted on there, not as many, slightly different approach. But as you heard, a total of 90 trees being planted across the site, 66 of which are street trees. That's significantly more than was originally envisaged. There's been a very a healthy discussion about what the NPPF is talking about in terms of tree-lined streets. Certainly officers took a different view to the developer, but the resulting scheme is one which we're both comfortable with, and we both think complies with and is appropriate and provides a different sense of character and appearance as you move through the development. The trees are all to be either in a land which will be owned and managed by the Highway Authority or by the management company. So these aren't trees which are within, we're not relying on street trees being within people's gardens where they may be removed in the future. So we're consistent with the NPPF there, which says where street trees are provided, there needs to be suitable long-term management arrangements for them. Affordable housing is being provided, 28 homes being provided. It's 35% of the total number on the site. Ordinarily, on a site on the edge of a town like this, we'd be looking at 30% provision. The outline permission was granted on the basis of 40% provision. So 35% is over the level which we would usually seek, but less in terms of a percentage than was secured with the outline permission. Although if the lower number of dwellings which was permitted by the outline permission, which was 70, was to be built with 40% provision, that would be 28 affordable homes. But as you can see here, we've got a mix of shared ownership and affordable rent spread through the site, which the Affordable Housing Officer is happy with, and the affordable housing mix is agreed. There's a lot of house types, as you'll have seen looking on the website, so I haven't tried to show them all on the presentation because it would take quite a long time. But just as a sort of flavour, I've got some 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed properties just to show. So these are the 1 bed flats which have been provided as affordable housing. So these are 2 bed flats, again part of the affordable housing provision. So there's a couple of different types of this. So this is one version where we've got render to the front within brick coining, but there's also just brick versions. And this is a 2 bed house, again part of the affordable housing provision. And then there's another 2 bed house, but this is a market sale. You'll have read within the report that we've considered the study which is shown, and so whether this should be considered a 3 bed property or a 2 bed property. We've taken the view that because the size of the bedroom falls below the minimum specified in the NDSS, it shouldn't be considered as a bedroom. So we're satisfied that's a two bedroom property with a study, but that's reflective of sort of market trends in terms of people home working still in some cases and wanting more space to be able to work at home. And then 3 bed property is just an example. That's one of the market properties. That's the same house type, but that's got a weatherboarded front compared to that one, which is brick. 3 bed semi-detached houses. And then we've got 3 bed affordable house, just an example. Bungalows. So we've got 2 market bungalows for sale, which are 3 bed units. So that's unusual to be having a developer which is offering bungalows for market sale. And then we've got 2 wheelchair user dwellings as well, bungalows, 1 3 bed and 1 2 bed. So that's helping to meet the need for that particular type of property. And then 4 bed properties, just again as examples. So that's a market property. And we've got a couple of affordable units which are also being provided as 4 bed properties. So there's a number of street scenes which have been provided, which attempts to give a visualisation of what the streets would look like and the houses together. So this is looking along the northern boundary, along the Spine Road. So looking along the top here. And then this is the south side of the same street. Then we've got the shared surface street. This is looking to the east. And the private drive looking west. So if you're looking from the open space here, looking back into the site. Just to point out, sorry, that bungalow there is that bungalow here. So officers were concerned about properties being constructed too close to the backs of the properties on Coney's Road. So where there's a particular sensitivity here, these 2 properties are the market sale bungalows which I referred to. And then this is the private drive on the eastern boundary as well. And then these are some CGIs which the applicant's provided. So this is standing on the footway coming into the site with the play area on the right-hand side. And this is sort of parcel 1 here. You can see the street trees planted running along both sides of the road. This is one from the Suds Basin, so this is in parcel 2, sort of at the bottom of the site, looking up. So this is the road running through between parcel 1 and 2. This is the houses looking the open space. And these are some other images of the streets as we move through. Again, you'll see the street trees here on the main street and lower order streets here. So these are this is the plan just showing where those street trees are and how they'll be managed as is proposed. Obviously that's subject to County Council adopting, but it will be management company if not. So in terms of the access of Tidings Hill, obviously this was our starting point in terms of discussions with the developer. So when we looked at the access of Tidings Hill, access wasn't approved as part of the outline, but there was indicative or illustrative information provided. An access was shown which showed 7 trees being removed on Tidings Hill for a number of reasons, including the excavation of the ditch opposite by the farmer, which they were entitled to do, but was obviously impacted on the ability of the road being widened. We've had to reconsider how the access is formed, and as the agent who spoke at question time referred, a number of different locations have been looked at along Tidings Hill to try and find a solution which works in terms of highway safety, so provides suitable visibility along the road, but also minimises the loss of trees. So whereas the outline permission envisaged the loss of 7 trees, regrettably 9 trees would be lost as part of this proposal that's now before us. So this is the tree removal plan, tree protection plan. So you can see the red are the trees or the areas of vegetation which are being removed. So we have tried to set out within the committee report in a bit more detail what is being removed. So we've been clear where we can be in terms of the larger trees which are being removed, the identified trees. But as you'll see, there are some groups of vegetation which are being proposed to be removed as well. So mindful of the fact that members do want to have a good understanding of what is being removed, the applicant has provided additional information here to try and show what some of this vegetation is. So what we're looking at here, for example, at the back of Grange Close, is predominantly blackthorn and hawthorn scrub, which will be removed. Along here, we've got sort of scrub, self-seeded stuff at the back of the hedge that you can see, which will be removed. So we've tried to be as clear as we can be in terms of the report that's been submitted and the committee report, what is being removed. This is just the access details in a little bit more detail, but as you can see, I've already explained the pedestrian access loops in around the back here and then picks up with the footways here at the end of the road. The carriageway coming in is 5.5 metres wide, and Tidings Hill would be widened to 4.1 metres. In terms of the landscape master plan, this is what has been submitted. So this is a master plan which is supposed to set out the broad approach. So you can see main areas of open space around the back here of Grange Close and along the front, here with Oak Road and Tidings Hill, and then another area of open space at the back here around the TPO oak tree. Note what was said by the Parish Council with regards to landscaping at question time. So this is the southern boundary, which I think was being referred to. So less additional planting there being planted along there. I'd have to say, having been out, I think there are some gaps, but they're not great from my recollection from being out earlier today and previously, but there are some gaps. We do have a landscaping condition, condition 28, which would provide the detailed landscaping planting, so it sort of builds on the master plan. If members were particularly concerned about that southern boundary, given the concerns that were raised by the Parish Council, we could certainly put an informative on which could say that we would expect to see additional planting to plant up any gaps along that southern boundary, and also to think about the planting that is put along there, because the point was raised about screening during winter months, so perhaps more evergreen planting could be considered as part of a native mix. But there's certainly a condition already that covers landscaping. This is the play area that's proposed. The Town Council did raise concerns as part of their earlier representation about accessible play equipment, and the applicant has amended some of the play equipment to provide some more accessible pieces. So we're broadly happy with what's proposed there. And then there was, as Councillor Beavis mentioned earlier, some updates that were sent round. So those were from my application. So one was with regards to this application was quite long, so I do apologise for its length and also that it came out today. But I will spend a couple of minutes going through that just to make sure everybody's aware. So firstly, a correction in our report. I'm afraid to say we've incorrectly reported the status in the emerging local plan. We said that it wasn't included within the Section 2 plan. It wasn't included in the version that went out for publication, that was published and was consulted on, but it has been included as part of the minor modifications. So where we've said that there was a conflict with the Section 2 plan, which we said was neutral in weight because of the outline permission, actually we need to acknowledge the fact that this is included within the Section 2 plan, so it's not part of the adopted plan still, because Section 2 hasn't been adopted, but it's part of the emerging plan. So that weight, or that sort of neutral harm or neutral benefit, is probably more of a benefit by virtue of the fact that this is a site which is proposed to be allocated. And then in terms of other conditions, we're just proposing to remove condition 3, which was the archaeology. So the site investigation has been done and we haven't received a report concluding what was found. That has been provided now and has been approved, so we don't need that condition anymore. Unfortunately, when we wrote the report, the committee report originally, we relied on the conditions provided by the SUDS team. They, on closer scrutiny, weren't correct, so we've asked them to clarify, and they've now proposed the 3 standard SUDS conditions. So we're removing condition 19, recommending we remove condition 19, which is what they originally recommended, and replacing that with the 3 standard SUDS conditions. Condition 25, we proposed to cover highway works. We'd missed off the upgrading of bus stops to serve the site, so that was an oversight on our part, so we need to cover that. And then the conditions 31, 32, 33 and 34, they're about making sure the affordable housing is designed to the appropriate accessible standard. Unfortunately, we've incorrectly identified some of the plots there, so we're just correcting the plots so it tallies up with what's actually being provided. We need to add we recommend we add an external lighting condition. We did have an external lighting scheme provided, which we're broadly happy with. The layout has changed slightly. The lighting scheme hasn't changed with it. So we need to make sure we've got a correct lighting scheme for the layout, which we're looking to approve. So we recommend adding an external lighting condition. And then just some typos, I'm afraid, on some of the approved plans listed. So we haven't changed what's on the website. We're just updating how we've recorded them on the approved plans list. So apologies for all of those. And then we did say we would update members on a couple of points with regards to financial contributions. So we can confirm what the outdoor sport contribution will be and the allotment contribution. Now we've re-indexed those. And there's a minor point about how we're drafting for the library's contribution. It doesn't affect the total amount that will be paid if 80 dwellings are built. But just for completeness, we're reporting that because the county council want the obligations set out slightly differently. Within the agreement. Also, we're recommending we add a refuse collection obligation, which just makes sure that the operations team, the council, can go onto the estate roads and collect refuse and have that right to do that, and that if any damage is done to the private roads where we use the roads reasonably, we won't be held liable for that. So that's an additional obligation we've added. So just quickly, in terms of harms and benefits, so we still have that conflict with the adopted development plan. It conflicts with RLP2 and CS5. But as we've updated you, the conflict isn't there with Section 2 because it's proposed to be included through the minor modifications. So assuming that happens, it will be part of the emerging plan. We previously reported this harm as neutral. As I said, arguably it should be seen as a benefit in terms of the site coming forward as part of the Section 2 plan, so delivery of a plan which we've allocated or will be allocating for development. We do acknowledge there is harm to trees and hedges with what's been removed. We've tried to explain what that is, and there's certainly, but at the end of the day, even with the extensive planting, we do accept there is harm there to be accorded. Delivery of market housing and affordable housing, we think, is a benefit. We do acknowledge that the outline permission of 70 units already has been counted in our housing land supply, but there is a small increase here, and certainly the affordable housing is held up as well. So we think those are still benefits. And notwithstanding the concerns that were expressed at question time, officers would still consider the site to be in a sustainable location. And indeed, the site has been assessed by the council previously as being one which is suitable for development in terms of its location and all other matters. So it would be, I think, a stretch now to reach a different conclusion with regards to whether it will be a sustainable location for development. So previously we've assessed the site as being suitable for residential development. Extensive work has gone on the scheme layout and design, as you'll have seen from the application documentations. Lots of revised plans and documents have been received. Commentary has been provided by the applicant to explain how the scheme has developed through work with officers. So we now have a detailed scheme where we have no objections from consultees. We consider in flat planning balance terms. We consider benefits outweigh any adverse impacts, and we therefore recommend approval subject to the update in terms of conditions and heads of terms. But hopefully that presentation has been of help. But I appreciate there's quite a lot of issues, and as usual, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for a very detailed information, especially with all the additional information we've received this afternoon. Members, I'll get it right this time. Councillor Monday.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have to acknowledge that that there is outline permission for 70 homes on this site, so the precedence for building is there. I'm not going to argue against that. I just have a question that outline 40% of those 70 homes was affordable, yet now we have the same 28 affordable homes on, in effect, 80 houses on this. What's changed? Why is the precedent set 40% and now it's down to 35? Why did the planning authority not take 40% and make it 32 homes? Just a question. And yet all I can see here is 10 extra homes for the developer to make a substantial profit on. I do acknowledge Councillor Powell in her statement. Tidings Hill is really narrow. It is not a very good road to traverse either up nor down, and I do worry about the amount of construction traffic going up and down Tidings Hill, and I consider that is going to be quite dangerous. I accept that 70 homes for outline has already been granted, so there's not much we can do about that. There will be construction traffic. But I just wonder how you're going to ensure that that traffic does go down Tidings Hill, because it certainly can't come through Oak Road. That is a single track lane, and even where it comes out onto the top of Tidings Hill, you know, turning left or right, you are really on a single track road there as well. That cannot be made into a rat run. 5 years ago, we're trying to get that into a quiet lane. That hasn't been successful. I don't understand why. Maybe we should push for that. And the disappointment here is that now we've lost more trees to shoehorn the access for this development onto a place on that road. You know, just because a farmer has decided to actually do something to clear out his verges and whatnot. And that's a disappointment. I'll leave it to Councillor Abbott, who I'm sure has got some issues with the rest of the development. I'm not going to support this for the fact that yet again here we are with 80 homes on the doorstep of Halstead, within Halstead, with infrastructure that we're overwhelmed, we can't cope with. It does actually state in 7.4.1 that courthole surgery cannot sustain this development. So for that reasons, I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Neil, would you like to respond on the affordable housing calculation? Just clarify that. I think most of us understand, but for Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So when the outline application was made, the applicant on that application proposed 40% affordable housing. So that wasn't something which officers required. That's not something we had a policy basis to ask for or require. That was just something that they offered. Obviously, from the council's point of view and officers' point of view, we were quite happy to accept that provision. The site has subsequently been sold. The developer has looked at the site, has looked at what our policy requirements are, and has offered 35%. So that's obviously clearly not the 40% that was previously offered, but that is still more than the 30%, which actually our policy would require, or which we would have secured on any other sites around the edge of Halstead, Braintree, Witham, or other settlements. So we could continue to ask for 40%, but there would be no policy basis for asking that. And if it was appealed, then an inspector would start off by looking at what our policy position was. And they would presumably, well, in my estimation, they would be likely to conclude that the requirement on policy is 30%. Here's a developer who's offering 35%. I find it very hard to see why, notwithstanding the outline permission, why an inspector would conclude that 40% needs to be provided. I think in terms of benefits, I think it's fair to say that if you're weighing up either the outline application or this full application and you're looking at benefits, I think if you had 40% affordable housing provision, that would be an even greater benefit. But I think here we've got a 35% provision, 28 units. So in terms of unit provision, we've got the same number of houses, affordable houses potentially being provided for the town, and more than we would expect or require or be able to require by policy. So that's the position. We could refuse it and say 40%, but like I say, I really don't think we would get very far with that argument.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And it's a difficult one because, you know, we've opened the door and, you know, in terms of where we are tonight, we've come so far way down. But there's a couple of points I just want to make, if I may. First of all, thank you to Neil for that really helpful, it was a helpful presentation, and pulled in the previous email that we got this afternoon, which, you know, we just did need to cover off for the benefit of the public. So I do appreciate that. A few things I just wanted to bring up. I mean, I was the previous county councillor for this area and kind of local lass to the area anyway, so I know this road and run this road actually quite frequently, and it's just such a really bad area of highway infrastructure. And as previously Councillor Munday said about quiet lane status, you know, we have to put this through the local highways panel, which members are aware of, and still we wait and we wait because other quiet lanes that were put forward, you know, some 5, 6, 7 years ago are getting priority because they've been waiting longer. And this is the real frustration that, you know, we're putting more homes and infrastructure in without actually dealing with some of these issues. There's also a scheme in that the panel there was, I know it was certainly a long way down the track, to get some narrow road signs on Tidings Hill because of the narrowness of that area and cars overtaking. I mean, the sight line in this area, and I've been written to over the years by many residents concerned about this, is really quite bad. And Councillor Munday also mentioned about, you know, potential rat runs. These are rat runs, and they are regularly used. And Neil mentioned previously about the spa location. I think I'm right in saying that spa is actually closing or closed, and they're actually talking about bringing forward an application for, I think, some sort of early years nursery. And, you know, this is really just going to impact more on these roads. And sometimes I just don't think that we think this through. And I want to end in a minute with something that I'm also jolly frustrated about, and I'll just end with that in a sec. But I wanted to talk about health, if I may. Again, I know you know what the answer is. I've sat on and continue to sit on many health boards to this date. But when we think of the accumulation of homes that we're putting into Housestead, it's just not enough. If you add up all the benefits of the last few years and you think about what extra are we getting, I'm not aware we're getting anything extra. You know, nothing new is going up. There's no extra, you know, addition to the Elizabeth Courtauld surgery. And they are absolutely struggling. They're ringing around patients now asking whether they could think about moving to other surgeries. So, you know, that health aspect, it really does concern me. I wanted to bring up again, if I may, about this Section 106 agreement. I mean, whether we like to admit it or not, you know, Housestead Rural and Grinster Green Parish Council is a parish in its own right. And this is the closest, I think, of most of the developments we've looked at over the years to the centre of Grinster Green, of which I know the area very well. It's got an amazing farm shop and a cafe there. You struggle to get a table. It is so busy. And yet they have a beautiful playground with, you know, very, very old equipment, struggling to get money to get more. And we just seem to be ignoring this. So I think the two things I would say for officers to continue, you know, to really consider in the future is that we need to be listening to Housestead Rural and Grinster Green Parish Council. When we meet at these town and parish council meetings, you know, we spend hours and hours going to these meetings, talking to our parish and town clerks and our parish and town councillors. And you know, in some respects, I think that, you know, that communication isn't fusing. And I think it's a real shame, because I'm a real supporter of our town and parish councils. Two final points. The speaker this evening, the chair of the parish council, said that what he would like to see by condition is a landscaping scheme to the southern edge of the site, and consulted with the parish council. I think I would like to see that condition put in this evening, that we do go back and let the parish council have a say on what this planting scheme is going to look like. And finally, bringing all of this together, about a year ago at this authority, we spoke about members' forums, and we spoke about an opportunity of bringing communities, councillors together, hopefully partners. We're going to debate this soon, I'm sure. But here we are, almost a year, I think, or so down the track. I know we're going to be talking about this soon, and I've raised it with the Cabinet member at the last two full council meetings. But we could have had such an opportunity at the front end of this development to bring together parish, town, councillors, highways, all of us together with the developer. That was my initial understanding of the concept of the forums, is that we spoke about this at the front end, and we don't all have to come along on nights like tonight and battle our way through to try and get more for our communities. So really, I know it's coming down the track, but it's that important. And I think tonight has really demonstrated to all of us how important these forums are. I'll leave it there, Madam Chairman, and I'm really happy to listen to what other members have got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Beavers, I must just remind you once again, as far as the National Health Service is concerned, we have to give them what they request. We do not. They have their own criteria. We do query it over and over again. If they only ask for 30,000, that's what they ask for. We can't say, oh, would you like 100? We just can't do that. So there's nothing we can do. I'm sure Neil agrees with me entirely. Thank you. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, in terms of the starting point of the plan, as the officer has said, we've got an outline consent and therefore de facto goes to allocation. So this is a different position to the previous ones we discussed tonight. I thought the discussion around affordable housing percentage was helpful, and yeah, we're slightly over policy, so that, you know, in terms of what's in front of us, that's good. I thought the play area design on this one was good, and especially as they're not trying to use the attenuation basins. I will always vote against that. You can't have children running around a flooded pond. Well, not it's a long time ago now, but when I was small, yeah, they love it, but it also can be messy and a bit dangerous. Thank you also to officers for being really clear on the trees on this one. That was much more helpful. And if we could have that on every one and also a table in the report, it does really make a difference. That said, perhaps if they come in for 70 houses, a few more trees might have been kept. But yes, the losses are unfortunate. I would like to take issue with what the representative said from the developers. He said something like the proposals will contribute towards reducing energy demand. Well, no, they won't. This site will increase energy demand overall from the town of Houston and indeed the district of Braintree. But the increase might be slightly less than it would otherwise have been. I think that's what he was trying to say. But in absolute terms, obviously energy use will increase. And I know the answer. I know what the answer is. Although maybe the government, you know, they've got this big energy reform going underway, and Councillor Schwar and I raise this on a regular basis. This would be a perfect opportunity for rooftop solar. I don't believe there are any, but hopefully the government's going to move on that soon. Definitely agree with what other speakers, including Councillor Beavers, have said about the local lanes are clearly narrow, and the LHP. I mean, it's ridiculous how long it takes to progress, even quite simple things like quiet lanes, let alone the more complicated things. I just wanted to pick up on the lighting. I mean, obviously we've got a condition, and the report states at 11.54 that the lighting will prevent boundary features from being lit. I do hope that's the case. But there's a bit of detail in there I think it's worth picking up on. It talks about ensuring that lux levels are 1 or less at the access, and therefore and warm white light, which is 3,000 K or lower, to reduce impact to foraging commuting bats. Well, where the access will go through, obviously the hedges and trees are going to be removed. That instantly provides a barrier to bats because they lose that connectivity, which is vital to them. 1 lux is very high. I mean, I do some work on this at national level, and we're trying to get the numbers reviewed because there's been a mistake. I think I've raised this before. There's been a mistake in the brightness of the moon that's put into bat reports, and it's about double what it should be. Scientists have gone out and measured how bright the moon is, and it's about 1/4 of a lux. So what's being stated here is 4 times as bright as the full moon, and for some species that will cause disturbance. So I don't blame officers for picking up on something that might have been in other reports, but it is an issue that's being looked at. But other than that, the condition is in there. So I find myself on this one a little bit caught on it because in some respects I think some parts of it are good, other parts less so, but I'll see what others have to say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah. Councillor Spear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's very good that the developers come forward with the electrical vehicle charging points, the fact that they're going to put super fast broadband across all the properties as well. And I'm very pleased that Councillor Beavers has picked up my previous point about making some Section 106 available to Greens to Green Parish Council, because it seems that these planning applications are going around Houston, and actually Greens to Green is not having any benefit. I can completely understand, as laid out in 13.4.1 on page 172, about those Section 106 is going to Houston. But I also do feel at the same time that we are missing an opportunity here to provide our rural community with what they have requested. And this request has been in for a number of years, and I do feel that officers should consider those requests going forward for the development that's gone around Houston, even if it's only a percentage, because they are losing their part of their parish, which will, I presume, eventually go to boundary changes in Halstead over time. I think that point has been well made tonight, and I do hope that officers take note of that as well, for the benefit of Greenster Green residents. Overall, I'd just like to, the footpath away from the road and the entrance, I think, is a very good move on this development. I think it's a good idea quite frequently to take footways away from main roads where traffic is going up and down, especially here where we've got potentially lots of children in the play area as well. So to keep that association together, I think, is actually a good design of this. And I completely concur with some of the comments about Tidings Hill and Oak Road. You know, it is going to be a problem, but I think we must take into account that when we say there's 80 homes here, not everybody's going to leave the house at the same time every day. So the data that Essex County Council have on what is accessible into the road network is fairly thorough these days. So while I understand that there's a problem with where people park and everything else, I think there's going to be adequate room for the actual movements. And of course, hopefully over time, people will think twice about jumping into a car and undertake a bit more active travel, e-bikes, or cycling, and use public transport, should it come up to this point in time, once it's potentially complete. So overall, you know, outline planning permission has been there, and I think, again, I would like to see a little bit more landscaping, especially the thickening on the southern side there, because in the wintertime, we always consider these in the summer when they're in, the illustrations are full. But actually, what's really important too is in the wintertime to take effect of the winter view. And lastly, but not least, I'm glad Councillor Abbott mentioned about solar PV. But of course, the other thing is that regardless of how much energy we make, what we do need to do is to request developers to increase the levels of insulation, because that's so important. Without the level of insulation, it's going to go. And I hope that, you know, again, we can bring this forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, obviously we're in a different position with this application because outline consent was granted on the site, and it is now forming part of our adopted local plan. So that, as has been pointed out, the principle of developing this site has been established. It is unfortunate that there will be some tree loss to create access, but there is no way to get into this site without tree loss, and obviously accessing the site from Tidings Hill is far preferable than accessing from Oak Road, which is the only other alternative. So there is, unfortunately, it's a price that has to be paid to develop this site. There are definitely positives with the application that's come forward. I think there's a good mix of housing in particular. I'm pleased that we are addressing some of the needs of housing in terms of providing some smaller and hopefully more affordable housing on the market side, and obviously quite substantial provision on the affordable side, including one-bedroom flats. So that is definitely, I think, a big positive for Halstead. There also obviously quite substantial tree planting through the site, which will be make it a much nicer place to live, and obviously have ecological benefits as well. Also substantial Section 106 contributions. I'm particularly pleased to see some contribution towards community building, which I think is often overlooked, but an important asset. And as Scattergood has said, we always talk about health, but we can only ask what the health authorities request. We would love to be able to ask for more, but we cannot. So it is not in our gift. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions of Neil. Apologies, Neil, if I missed this, but did you mention the additional bus improvements to the bus stops on Whitehorse Avenue? Apologies, missed that. The other point is obviously when this outline application came forward, the proposal was to increase the width of Tiding Hill to 5.5 metres. That's no longer possible. So the width will be 4.1 metres, which the Highways Authority seem to be satisfied with, so we can't change that. But does the road have to be widened to 4.1 metres? And is there a condition, because I couldn't find it? Finally, and this is probably a bit of a sort of probably a wish list item, but when we had an application that came before us in Witham not so long ago, I think it's Rectory Lane in Witham, there was a proposal to actually close that part of that road. Rivenhall, correction, correct. To completely close it to traffic. I just wonder whether any consideration has been given to actually closing a section of Oak Road completely to traffic, as pointed out by some of the letters that I read on the website. There are some really well-used footpaths there, which obviously access from people from that southern side of Housestead and the new developments as well. I'm not sure, obviously that closure of the road in Rivenhall, what did form part of that planning application, I don't know whether there's been any consideration given to that here. Obviously hasn't been probably discussed with any of the parish town councils, but perhaps you could comment on those points. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Parker. So yeah, the bus stops was included within the update, so apologies we missed that, and I appreciate there's a lot in the update, but yeah, we have covered that. So that's added to condition 25 as an additional item, so we've got that covered. In terms of increasing the width on Tidings Hill, it is shown on the drawings. I was just looking at the condition. So the condition talks about the access and the visibility display. It doesn't explicitly refer to the widening, although it's shown on the plans. So it's certainly something that's proposed to be done. We could amend 25 slightly just to explicitly refer to the widening of the road, if that was something you thought was appropriate. No problem to do that. And then on the closure of Oak Road, thank you for asking the question. Yeah, absolutely. It was something we knew was a concern and would be an issue. So I've asked the Highway Authority, both on the outline permission, so when we were dealing with that so many years ago, and then again on this application, whether we should be doing something, anything to manage Oak Road, whether it be signage, restrictions, quiet lane status, partial closure, whatever. I think we'd need to be careful if there was a closure, and that was pointed out to me that there's obviously residential properties down there, but it still seemed there was the potential to do something. The highway officer that we deal with took it back to County Hall and spoke to the people that he needs to speak to, and we were told quite unequivocally that they didn't want any changes made to Oak Road at all. So it's not something, it's certainly something we thought about, and it's not something which the developer hasn't been willing to do. We just haven't asked them to do it, because ultimately the Highway Authority manage the highway network, and their view is it should be left as it is. So that's what we've had to do, I'm afraid. So it certainly was considered. But yeah, we're certainly on those other bits. I think the bus stop we covered, and we can just tweak 25 just to cover the widening point, if that's okay.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Mann.
Very rapidly, Chair. The game changer here is that the status of the site has changed, and it is due to become an allocated site under Section 2 of the local emerging local plan. That really sort of cements the principle of potential development. I mean, no application is perfect. This one isn't. My private gripe would be the mix of market housing. There are not enough two-bed dwellings. It doesn't properly represent local need, but we know again from previous appeals that inspectors don't feel this is a point for a refusal. So it is something that maybe we grudgingly have to accept.
Thank you very much. Well,
Sorry, just a couple of points. So Councillor Mann's point on the housing mix. We don't think we can apply full weight to the local plan, this Section 2 local plan policy, but we do have one coming, which should give us more weight. So, and I'm sure the developer has heard that, so they won't be surprised when we raise it in the next pre-app discussion with them on another site. And if I could just come back on the point about Greenstead Green and Housestead Rural, which has been raised on a couple of occasions. So just to be clear with this particular application, the financial contributions that we're recommending and which we're able to ask for are for outdoor sport, allotments and a community building. In terms of play, there isn't any money being sought for play because the developer is providing a play facility on site which meets need in terms of the spend, the value of the play equipment. It more than meets our standard. So there isn't any sort of play money, if you like, in the 106, which could be put to Greenstead Green and Housestead Rural, even if we thought that was somewhere which realistically children living on this development would be likely to walk to access to play. So I think certainly we hear, we've all heard as officers quite clearly what members are saying about thinking about where contributions could be spent within parishes, and Councillor Abbott made the point earlier that we don't always get it right in some members' views, with Rivenhall being a case in point. But I think certainly with this one, we think in terms of the contributions that we are seeking, if people were using those facilities, so sport, allotments, community building, they would be likely to be using them within the town rather than in Greenstead Green. So that's why the agreement has been, or the heads of terms have been drafted as they are, and that's why we're looking to spend the money in the way that we are.
It's still the same argument you used 2 or 3 years ago when we had the other development. Or was used. It is very difficult. I do feel for the rural parishes when they don't get some of the funding. This means even if they don't, even if all the facilities are going to be used in Housestead, I still think the rural ones should get a small proportion for something that is in their scheme of works that they need to do. I don't have anyone else wishing to speak at the moment, and no one's moved anything, so we could be here till a bit longer. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having listened carefully to all the discussion tonight, again, it's clear that the permission is to extend from the outline, and I'd be more than happy to move officers' recommendations for this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Does it find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Chairman. Everything's been covered.
Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application, and I know there are so many things we're going to be adding. Condition 25, we're going to add route widening the road. We've got many amended and corrected conditions. We're adding an additional lighting condition. The list of approved plans has changed. Changes to the heads of terms, re-index linking due to inflation, refuse collection, and we've also discussed an informative regarding planting on the southern side of the site. I think that's everything that's been raised. If anyone thinks I've missed anything, that is what we're voting on, members. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? The application has been granted. Thank you very much indeed. We now come to, sorry, I've lost my paperwork. Come to application 5D. Application 22000150HH, 34 Buckwoods Road, Braintree. Members, this is a householder application coming to us because the applicant is a member of the staff, and that covers our rules. We have no speakers, so we go through the presentation, please. That's going to be made by Mel, please. Thank you.
So I was going to explain that.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Scatterby got in there. Stole my thunder. So the application before you this evening is a householder application. for a single-storey rear extension and a smaller first-floor extension at 34 Buckwoods Road in Braintree. So the first slide here is the location plan. So you can see the property sits within a well-established residential area and is a semi-detached property on Buckwoods Road. This next block plan shows in a little bit more detail the position of the property. The area in green is the proposed single-storey extension, and the area in blue is the proposed first-floor extension. So these are the looks better on that one. These are the existing floor plans of the property. So we've got 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom, and the bathroom at the moment sits within a cat slide roof, which will become more apparent when we look at the photographs. These are the existing elevations. So that bathroom that I was talking about sits in this space here, so that cat slide roof that drops down. The proposed elevations, so this is the proposed first floor extension, and then we have a single storey extension that extends out along the boundary with the neighbouring property. And this is the view from the rear. So again, we can see the first floor extension here that will accommodate the second bedroom that will be slightly larger. So there isn't actually an increase in bedrooms, it's a reorganisation of the first floor, as this plan here shows. So we've got the large open plan living kitchen area at the back of the property, and then upstairs the bathroom moves to a central position, and bedroom 1 becomes slightly larger at the back of the property, but it still maintains just those 2 bedrooms upstairs. So these are photographs of the property. So the front elevation will remain unchanged, as will the parking arrangement to the side. This is to the rear, so you can see the cat slide roof here. So this is where the proposed first floor extension will go. As you can see, work has started on the site, and this is the depth of the proposed ground floor extension. Neighbouring property with an existing outbuilding in their back garden. And this is looking towards the attached neighbouring properties. Some further photographs a little bit further back in the garden. So officers consider that the proposed extensions are of an appropriate size, scale and design and layout, and would be in keeping with the character and appearance of the existing property and those within the locality. No detrimental impact would occur to neighbouring residential amenity or highway matters. Officers conclude that the proposed extensions would be acceptable, and it's recommended that planning permission is granted.
Thank you very much, Mel. Councillor Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It seems to me that often with these sorts of applications, the main issues are whether there's any impact on the neighbours, particularly when you have a semi-detached, and also whether there's any sort of adverse impact on the character of the street scene and the property itself. And I think in both those respects, perfectly acceptable. So I'm happy to move approval.
Thank you very much. I'll find a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Did you wish to speak?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to add anything to this application? Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting it? Thank you very much. Very much. Members, we're now coming to our last application. I have 2 speakers and then we have a presentation. I wonder if we should move standing orders so that we don't get interrupted, because I can't see this ending before 10:15. Would someone move?
Happy to move, Madam Chairman.
Is that seconded? All those in favour that if the meeting goes beyond 10:15, we carry on. Thank you very much indeed. That's been agreed. Thank you. We now come to our final application this evening. As application 20-007324, land north of Osier Way, Sybil Headingham. It can be found on pages 203 to 233. as I think we have two speakers on this application. The first person wishing to... Oh, sorry, we have three. Sorry, I can't count. The first person wishing to speak is Mr. Michael Ward. He is an objector. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Michael Ward, and I am a resident local to this application site. To be clear, I do not object to the principle of this development. There is a clearly defined planning history, and it is important that the Council makes efficient use of vacant sites within the district settlement boundaries. However, I do express some concerns about the application that I would like to share with members, which a number of my neighbours also share. First of all, residents feel that the public consultation undertaken by the applicant prior to submission was covert and a missed opportunity on what is clearly an important facility for the local community. The consultation was not clearly advertised, and not once did I receive any correspondence to make me aware of this, despite living very close to the site. At the online event, residents were muted, and it was not clear that comments needed to be submitted in advance, so we couldn't engage with the applicant. I wrote to the applicant separately and never received a response to my queries. This did not feel like genuine public engagement, and residents felt excluded from the pre-application process. In my written representation to this application, I raised that there were inadequacies and inconsistencies with the application. For example, there were missing reports, incomplete plans, and in some documents, the submission indicated different hours of opening, and even that this new facility would accommodate patients from a differing number of practices. This has not instilled confidence in the public and has left residents not knowing which information is correct. Even when this application is being considered by Planning Committee, I note a fundamental issue with the submission. As I'm sure this Council will be aware, the red line boundary around an application site should include all land necessary to carry out the proposed development, including land required for access to the site from the public highway. The appropriate notice should then be served on all landowners within that red line. The applicant's own submitted highways boundary plan shows that the adopted highway stops where Osier Way meets Buick Court. The submitted red line therefore appears to be incorrect, as it should extend beyond the site to include the part of Osier Way that extends up to the current highway boundary, and notice served on the landowner, which according to Land Registry is still Bloor Homes. I'm sure that officers will give this point due consideration before this application proceeds any further. I have raised that the lack of landscaping is a missed opportunity on this site, which forms part of the gateway to the estate beyond and will be a focal point of the community. Officers acknowledge this in the committee papers, and that something else would need to give in order to provide more landscaping. As I have raised in my written representation, in my opinion, the site is too small for the level of development proposed, and therefore cannot accommodate appropriate levels of car parking or more extensive landscaping. National and local policy recognises the importance of trees and the contribution that they make to the character and appearance of an urban environment, as well as the benefits that landscaping can bring to climate change and biodiversity. Access and car parking are clearly the key issue here, and given my restriction on timing, my neighbour will cover these issues in his speech. With all matters considered, I respectfully urge members to carefully debate this application, including the proposed level of car parking and landscaping, whether it is overdevelopment, and ultimately whether it is truly the best development that could be achieved on this site. This is an important facility for the local community, and I ask members to consider whether this development on council-owned land is an exemplar scheme and is of the same quality as would be expected elsewhere in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Next person wishing to make a statement is Mr. Robert Hubbard. He's from 2 Ashley Street, Silver Headingham.
Good evening. My name is Robert Hubbard, and I'm a resident on Earl's Garden. And whilst I am not against the provision of a much-needed medical centre in principle, I am objecting to this application in its present form, and I must draw your attention to a number of points with regard to access and parking. Access is from Swan Street into Osier Way. Highways have raised no objection, but their boundary plan does not show the pinch point just inside the entrance. This is shown on the applicant's travel plan to better effect and is a congestion point, even now with an estimated vehicular traffic movement of approximately 800 per day. This will increase by approximately 1,500 according to the applicant's estimation, bringing the total to around 2,300, an increase of over 150%. The proposal of an in-out access for patients further into Osier Way will have to bear most of this increase, and any congestion and minor accident would paralyse the estate, as Osier Way is the only access and many vehicles already park in the road. Parking does not comply with the adopted parking standards. 11.26 of the committee report shows a shortfall of 18 places. Of that, 11 are staff parking, almost 50% short. Whilst the developer has been seeking additional off-site overflow parking, staff parking, none is guaranteed. Referring specifically to the Baptist Church, 11.216 states it would not be appropriate to impose such a requirement by condition. Why not? Or why have no parking conditions been imposed generally, considering the shortage? Only 3 months ago, this was one of the reasons for refusal of an application for Violet's Caravan. Surely it is important that consistency is applied with these rules. No condition lets the developer off their obligation or promise to provide the same. The developer recognises this shortfall by their need to search for extra. Even though 4 sites have been proposed, one of which is in Ripper Court, owned by BDC, there is no indication that all of these have been followed up. 11.218 does acknowledge that the lack of parking does weigh against this proposal. By comparison, in East Berkholt, the surgery provides 60 car parking spaces to serve 11,500 patients, only 500 less than this proposal. Only 31% of patients and 10 to 20% of staff live in the area, and whilst there is a proposed travel plan, this is an academic proposal, and in reality, I would question how effective this will be. The bus service is not as good as suggested, and doesn't serve the rural villages the centre would serve. And how many people would cycle or walk in bad weather, especially if they are unwell? Without the overflow parking, vehicles will end up parking on the estate roads with the attendant conflict with residents that inevitably occurs in these situations. I would ask members to consider a day in the life of a resident trying to get out of their drive to take children to school, or the danger of a young child running out into the road behind a parked car. Highways need to revisit the access from Swan Street from a congestion point of view, and conditions are required to ensure more equitable and compliant parking for the development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hubbard. The final person wishing to make a statement is Mr. Alec Caruso. He is the agent and he is joining us remotely. Good evening. Would you like to make your statement now, please?
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity and apologies for not being able to be there in person tonight. My name is Alex Caruso from ACA, an agent for the planning application in question, speaking on behalf of One Medical Property Holdings in favour of the development of the land located north of the work hub in the village of Siboledingham and accessible from Osier Way to build a 2-storey medical centre. The proposed building will include 11 clinical rooms with a large waiting area and reception, dispensary, utility and storage space, staff room, accessible toilets facilities and office spaces. Additionally, the proposal includes a refuse store area, external landscaping, parking and provision for an overflow car park in the grounds of the Baptist Church of the Library. One Medical Property Holdings will complete the transfer of the land for the medical centre by Braintree District Councils, who owns the land, after the long-awaited and hopeful planning approval. We spoke to the Planning Department on the 28th of July 2021 and have had several conversations since then. We also held public information events on the 29th and the 30th of November 2021 and shared several updates via a dedicated website during the period of the planning application process. Stakeholders' engagement has been at the heart of our design and development approach. With our robust application, we have considered and addressed issues raised as part of the consultation process, as follows. The current facilities serve a patient list of around 9,000. The new facility has been designed to future-proof the needs of the local community as it grows and can serve about 12,000 patients from Seabull and Castle Edingham and the surrounding villages. The main focus of the proposed design is to provide a welcoming and non-clinical environment in accordance with dementia-friendly design principles, supporting an enjoyable experience for patients, visitors and staff. The size of the development is based on the project brief with a gross internal area of approximately 983 square meters. The proposed development is accessible from Osier Way and Buick Court with parking for 38 cars integrated within the site plan proposal. The building's volume is of a similar scale to the residential context, and its design has been developed considering distances from surrounding properties to ensure that the visual impact of the surrounding properties is minimized. The proposed layout is designed to satisfy the brief and provide a high-quality healing environment. The new building's orientations and distance from the residential properties is designed to overcome overlooking issues or significant loss of light to adjacent buildings. Materials have been selected to respect the local architecture of the context and introduce an innovative way to express the building's form. The building's elevations are sympathetic to the site and surrounding area. The building contributes to a welcoming, friendly and reassuring environment. The parking provision for patients meets likely demand. Staff provision will be managed through a combination of on-site provision, staff behaviour to be controlled through a travel plan, and overflow parking arrangement with the Baptist Church and the library. Incidentally, I can confirm that since the committee report, the Baptist Church has confirmed in writing full-time parking space availability.
Mr. Carissa, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to end you. I've let you have over your 3 minutes.
Oh, apologies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Members, that's brought us to the end of question time, and we now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Katie.
Neil.
Yes, Neil. Sorry, Neil. Yeah. I got the wrong email from Chris, obviously.
Yeah, so I'll present this one. So this is an application for the erection of a two-storey medical centre on land north of Osier Way in Civil Hedingham. So this is the application site outlined in red. So just in terms of surroundings, got some photos to show in a moment, but just to get your bearings, this is the main road coming through Civil Hedingham, the 1017 or Swan Street. So this is the junction here. The site has frontage onto two roads, Osier Way and Bewick Court. This coming back into the site here, this is the redevelopment of what was the Primdor site, so the development by Blore. So that was goes back to 2013. When the site was redeveloped, amongst the planning obligations within the Section 106, there was land provided to the District Council for the provision of a medical centre and also for an employment centre. So broadly speaking, the land which was transferred to the District Council is the area edged in red, which is for the medical centre, plus this site in the corner here, which was used and has been used to provide a work hub, so sort of serviced units with an adjoining car park. So that's been built out, and that's why the site has that sort of corner carved out there. So in terms of status of the site, a master plan was approved prior to the permission for the redevelopment of the site. So as part of our supplementary planning guidance, and we've got a master plan document which identifies the land in white here for that community use, as they termed it, so the medical centre and the employment use. And just you can see, yeah, the extent of the previous factory site has all been built out now, or redeveloped now as housing. So this is the last part of the overall factory site, which is to be redeveloped. So this is the work hub, just in terms of its surroundings. So this is the building, so a two-storey building, but a prominent sort of gateway feature building coming into the site. So the medical centre site is this bit around the back here off Osier Way, and this bit off Bewick Court here. So in terms of important issues that we need to cover. So obviously at question time, Mr Ward referred to the red line and the public highway. So if I just flip back to the location plan, so you can see the red line adjoins Osier Way and Bewick Court. Mr Ward was quite right. Osier Way isn't adopted public highway. We've checked with highway officers this afternoon. It's still in the process of being adopted, so not all of the estate roads are in that process at the moment. But certainly this part of Osier Way coming up here is, but as it stands, it's not public highway. However, the red line does adjoin Bewick Court here. So in terms of validity of the planning application, we think this is okay, and the red line does provide access onto the public highway. In terms of the vehicular entrance to Osier Way, or the access onto Osier Way, when the medical centre was transferred to the District Council, we were granted rights of access over Osier Way, so those rights are secured, and those rights would transfer to one medical group, so that we can be confident that there would be that public access available off Osier Way. So in terms of the application proposals, so you can see this is the work hub building down here. So the medical centre building is proposed to run this way, going back across the site. There'll be an entrance at the back here, vehicular entrance at the back here, which will provide access for the staff parking spaces at the back of the building. And then the main entrance, as I said, will be off Osier Way down here. And you can see the parking arrangement coming through here. So there is the ability to loop around, but public access would be through here. So in terms of the building, so I think we, as officers, we're very content with the design. We think it's has a contemporary appearance. We think it's quite well considered. There's good efforts have been made to break up the mass of the building. So it is quite a large building, but it's been designed in a way that gives it architectural interest and visual interest, and overall we think it's a success. The proposals is for a mix of materials, so there's a red brick, elements of white render, aluminium windows and doors with pressed metal surrounds, with the colours picking up that of the surgery, the business colours of surgery, and there's a timber structure providing this entrance feature here with landscaping above, and it's a reconstituted slate roof. So this is the rear of the building. So you can see here at the bottom, this is an image just showing some of the staff parking spaces. This is the back of the building here, just a CGI as opposed to the coloured elevation. And then the ends of the building. So this is sort of, if you stood on Bewick Court, if you were looking up here, so this is the end of the building. This is the pedestrian access here, so you could certainly come up Bewick Court and walk into the medical centre here, so you don't necessarily have to walk through the car park. And then this is the north elevation, which borders on to the commercial land to the north. So you'll have seen the floor plans. They don't produce particularly well, but you can see here the main points would be the visitors' entrance here, a waiting area and reception area here, pharmacy at the front, and then consulting rooms, clinical rooms running back. And then on the first floor, secondary waiting rooms, clinical rooms, and staff and office building, office space, I should say. So the roof form is quite interesting. So you can see here, this is probably the best image to look at, the CGI. So you can see we've got roof slopes, but actually within the roof form, we've got solar PV panels, and we've got a condition to make sure that those are secured. So we've got details of those panels to be provided, and then an actual requirement that they are provided. And then there's just a refuse store area, just in terms of appearance of buildings and structures. So that's at the front here, so that the refuse collection operator can easily collect from the site, but it's done in an appropriate manner where it's screened. There's some street scene drawings here, which show the building in a bit more context. So you can see here, looking from Osier Way, and then this is looking from the west, looking back across. So this is the work hub building here, so you can just see in terms of comparison of scale how it would stand and how it would relate. So, as I said, 2 points of access into the site. Parking is the main issue, which I think I'll probably try and concentrate on, because that's what has caused a number of concerns to be raised. I'd coloured the plan up, although helpfully when I've reproduced it, the colouring hasn't come through, so apologies for that. So the staff parking, these spaces at the back here, so these would have been yellow, and these ones, same bays here. We've got an area for drop-offs and also kept clear for ambulance drop-off as well. And there's cycle parking up the top here. The parking down here, this is for the work hub, so that's outside of the application site. So in terms of provision, as you'll have seen, we've tried to set out within the report what the situation is with the parking provision. I think the first thing to stress is in terms of parking standards for this type of development are maximum standards. So whereas with residential properties or residential development, we have minimum standards, we have maximum standards here. So what we've done is we've worked out, applying the parking standards, what the maximum requirement would be. So the requirement there would be 56 spaces. What the applicant is proposing is 38 spaces on site. 12 of those are to be allocated for staff use, 26 for patients. Overall, against the maximum standard, that leaves a shortfall of 18 spaces. We've gone through in the report, hopefully set out clearly how we've tried to assess parking. So we've looked at the number of consulting rooms and clinical rooms. We've looked at the information provided within the applicant's transport assessment, which looks at appointment times and the number of rooms that will be used to work out the likely number of patients that will be coming to and from the site. So we think that on this basis, if everybody drove to the site, 29 spaces would be required. That's against 26 provisions, so a minor shortfall in terms of visitor parking, but that would be on the assumption that everybody was driving. I think it's reasonable to assume that some people would walk. The shortfall in terms of provision would be largely against staff parking. So the applicant has advised through their application that there's 23 full-time equivalent staff working for the surgery, of which they expect 20 staff to be on site at any one time. We've obviously taken the applicant's word for what they're saying in terms of staff. That's quite a considerable number of staff, but that's what they're saying. So obviously, if all of those staff members were to drive to work, there would be insufficient parking on site. However, there are measures proposed through the application for a travel plan to encourage car sharing and other sustainable modes of transport. So we think that can be managed to a degree. If there is a shortfall still in terms of staff provision, then, as you've heard, the applicant is intending to make alternative off-site provision available. However, we don't think it's appropriate that is made a requirement. It couldn't be made a requirement by condition, and we don't think it would be appropriate. Well, we couldn't do it through legal agreement either because of the council being landowners. But we think with that additional parking, it shouldn't be taken into account, but it's certainly something which is being suggested as being provided by the applicant. However, even if that additional parking wasn't provided, officers still consider that the parking provision to be appropriate, given the transport assessment and the assessment that we've made of likely need. There is a residual concern from the Highway Authority that parking may take place outside of the site, and parking may become a problem along Osier Way, which, as you've heard, serves as the vehicular access to that residential development. There is a condition which requires a strategy to be submitted, so we can't have a legal agreement on this particular application, but we can have a strategy which will in effect require the developer to pay the county council a suitable sum of money in order that if parking does become a problem along Osier Way, that the county council could design a parking restriction scheme, could consult on that, and could make a traffic regulation order introducing restrictions if that was necessary to ensure highway safety. In terms of the safety itself, I know concerns have been raised about the access onto Swan Street, as you have seen in the update that we circulated. This was a point that was raised again by Sybil Headingham Parish Council. who were concerned about whether the access arrangements onto Swan Street had been suitably assessed. We did pass those comments on to the Highway Officer who assessed this and asked them to respond directly. They've confirmed that the Highway Authority have assessed the application and all the access arrangements, and they have no concerns over either access or capacity in terms of Osier Way or Swan Street. I think it's also worth bearing in mind in terms of the highway arrangement, as you come into Osier Way, but that was designed with the Highway Authority and was designed in a manner which was considered appropriate for the residential development, which was obviously consented at that time, but also with the knowledge that the employment use and the medical centre would be coming along at a future date. So just briefly to touch on this, there's been a lot of discussion with the applicant about the parking arrangements. So all of the parking bays do comply with the council's adopted parking standards. So we haven't tried to use smaller bays, which people would find difficult to use. We have also tried to make sure that the parking bays are arranged within the land that's available in a sensible manner, so that there aren't pinch points or restricted areas or where there would be restricted forward visibility. So we think all of the bays should be usable in terms of people getting in and out, which has been shown through tracking. And as you can see here, people will be able to pass through the development without conflicting with each other, with vehicles coming in the other direction. And there's just some examples of the swept path analysis which the applicant's done. So some photos of the site. So this is looking down Osier Way. So this is the residential properties immediately adjacent to the site. This is the work hub building down here. And this is the start of the site here. And then this is looking back up the other way, so standing by the work hub looking back up. So this is taken from within the work hub car park. So this is all of the application site here. So you can see we've got a property siding on directly to the site here, and then we've got properties backing on here with their gardens at the back. And then looking around the site and immediately adjacent to the site at the bottom here, so you can see some sort of low-key storage of perhaps building materials, some parking and commercial vehicles. There is a difference in levels, slight difference in levels between the site, but largely undeveloped. And then this is looking back across the site, so it's looking towards Bewick Court. So you can see we've got 3-storey flats here. This is where the site divides here, so the application site sort of finishes up here. So whilst we have got some first and second, and this is standing on Bewick Court, so this is the entrance which would be, as on that layout plan, provides that access to the back of the site and the visitor parking. And this is the public right-of-way which runs adjacent. So you can see here, this is the public right-of-way running back up. So you can see we've got the steel palisade fence which remains from when the factory was there. We've got a condition which requires means of enclosure, details to be provided to the council, which will include this boundary, and some of the drawings show sort of a brick wall, lower brick wall with metal railing above, something which should be more aesthetically pleasing but more secure, so something like that is envisaged. And no concerns have been raised about the car park being left open and antisocial behaviour in the work hub car park next door, but that could be covered by condition as well, if we felt that was appropriate to have that gate put on the car park, and we could certainly add an informative if members were particularly concerned about that. In terms of conditions, thankfully no big list of updated conditions, but one which I do think we need to change. So we had listed a compliance condition in terms of materials, just saying that it should be in accordance with the details submitted. On reflection, I think with the types of materials, so we've got red brick and we've got a reconstituted slate tile. Because those can vary in quality, we would want to see samples of those before we approve them. So just that by way of amendment to condition 4. So in terms of planning balance, so the principle of development is acceptable. It's long been acknowledged that the land would be used for a medical centre. We think the building is of an appropriate size, scale and design, and we think it's a high quality development in terms of the building, and we think it complements the sort of adjacent land, built form and materials, and positively contributes overall to and to promote sustainable transport, but with the additional funds available to the County Council with parking restrictions did prove to be required along Osier Way. So whilst we do acknowledge that
concern about the provision and the fact that it is lower than the maximum standards does weigh against it. We do consider that overall the development is acceptable, and we would recommend approval subject to the conditions set out within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Neil, for your usual very detailed report. An eagerly awaited facility which has generated a considerable amount of interest and discussion by those parish councils from which patients will attend. I'm not aware of any comments or statements received from doctors who will form the basis of the centre. Such comments, positive or negative, would be welcomed. At present, the NHS in general is subject to considerable pressures, including the large number of patients currently referred to A&E departments. Just how the new centre will improve matters must be a subject for some conjecture. We should be very supportive of this development and congratulate all those who have worked so hard to bring the development to the current stage. With any new venture, there may be some negatives, which will have to be overcome. The positives certainly ensure that I will provide a strong vote for approval. Just one point before I finish. One of the local councils, Castle Hedingham, were concerned that they'd not been given the opportunity to make comments relative to this development. I think they have done so now, due to an error on the documentation sent to them, which they mentioned is a long-standing issue concerning the Riverside Walk, which runs close to the development, where it is thought that many or some people will use, possibly by cycling or walking, to attend the facility. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I know the site very well as the councillor for the Hedinghams for almost 20 years and chairman of the Parish Council for many of them. So the presentation that Neil has presented us with this evening is very familiar. I mean, the principle of the Hedingham Medical Centre was established approximately 12 years ago now, and as the major regeneration site in the key service village of Sybil Hedingham, and at that stage the residents of Sybil Hedingham were consulted really well actually, and at that stage the principle of the medical centre came out really strongly, so that's why it was in the original master plan by the developer. But at that time, because the actual site itself, which is quite a lot larger than we're looking at today, because previous estates have been built on the site, the owner was sort of working on moving some of the scale of their business over to an industrial estate in Braintree, and that original sort of hatching in white was a community use, and at that stage it was the medical centre with parking, and there are some residents in the village that kind of always feel that because the actual director of the company wasn't able to move some of the business over, the district council really wanted to provide employment on that site. So that was kind of the arena that we were in, and that's kind of, you know, where we are today. And I really remember that journey, you know, being councillor and chairman for some time. But all of that said and done, Madam Chairman, we are where we are, and I would move and support officers' recommendations in the report. There are a couple of bits I just wanted to raise, and Councillor Johnson's quite rightly said that Castle Hedingham Parish Council, by the way, both parish councils support the application, albeit they do have concerns about parking. I'm just going to speak to that very shortly, but Castle Hedingham Parish Council I think it was Toppersfield as well, actually, Parish Council, were able to forward us some extra submissions this evening, well, this afternoon, so that was really helpful. And as Officer Neil has already pointed out, the issue is around parking. And I know that during the consultation, One Medical were looking at the Baptist Church, they were looking at a car park behind the library, they were also looking at some parking possibilities on the Rippers Court, which is owned by the council. I'm a little bit disappointed. I would have liked to have seen that done by condition. I'm not really sure why we can't put that in condition, but I'm sure Neil will come back and just quickly underline the reasons again. But I would have felt happier had we have got that commitment that these parking spaces are going to be found, because as one of our previous and very long-standing doctors in the village has said, this can either go terribly good or terribly wrong based on the parking. And I really do think we need to listen to our sort of clinicians around the village, of which we have many. So that is an issue. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, it was a resident that brought this up as well, about is there a possibility, and again by condition, of just thinking a bit more about the landscaping. I didn't see that much landscaping within this actual scheme, but that said, when we looked at the original scheme for this regeneration site, that riverside walk and that landscaping is absolutely huge. And we worked really hard on protecting that green lung, and that's brought real benefits to both Sybil and Castle Hedingham, because it sort of brings them together. But that said, and I do want to thank Neil for the work he's done with the Parish Council outside of these meetings. We've had the opportunity to meet with Neil on a regular basis. And we talk about the Section 106 agreement. I still think it's one of the best we've ever had in this district. We got over £1 million, nearly £1.5 million actually, on an estate that isn't that big compared to others that we've delivered. So to get £1.5 million out of the developer at that time, and I know the council spent £80,000 on a scheme to really make sure we were getting the best. So overall, I think we have done really well on this site. But I would like to see by condition a little bit more about the tree planting and landscaping, and I think we could achieve that, or an informative, as Neil said. Finally, I just wanted to say, I mean, this is really positive for the north of the Braintree district, and I and many other members in this chamber regularly stand up and talk about, you know, the increase of health services that we would like to see, and I think this is really going to deliver that. It's also very positive on employment, and that through the regeneration site in the original master plan was really strong. So, as I say, happy to move officers' recommendations with an informative on the planting of the additional trees if we could. And finally, I just wanted to mention, and it would be remiss of me not to, on behalf of the residents that I represent, is in terms of the Riverside Walk, we know we're waiting for the resurface of the Riverside Walk from the Station Road, and that Station Road is the area that the residents of Castle Hedingham will use. It's an ageing population, but if we can encourage those that can to walk the Riverside Walk, we have cyclists, you know, families with prams and all of that stuff, but we've really got to get that surface down. I know it's in hand, and I know we've gone out to tenders, but we've really got to get that surface down before the medical centre is opened. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Happy to listen to any other comments.
Thank you. You did move it, you said?
Yes, I have formally moved it, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Did find a seconder if I move on? It doesn't. So thank you, Councillor Johnson and other places. Yes, as you know, I was a fellow councillor when this all started many years ago. And so I've been through it, and I did think at the time we're probably asking a bit too much money, which for the developers, so that therefore we didn't get all the things we want. Neil, on the planting, if we wanted more planting, would we reduce the car parking? That's my big concern.
Yeah. So there's been quite a lot. There were quite a number of pre-application discussions with the One Medical Group. prior to the application being submitted, and certainly officers and our urban design consultant pushed for more tree planting. Certainly on other developments we would expect more. I think what we've had to acknowledge with this site is it is constrained in terms of its space. What we need to make sure is that the parking spaces that are provided are all usable. If we start trying to introduce additional substantial landscaping, that could reduce the amount of room for manoeuvres between spaces and for people to get in and out of cars and so on. So there is a landscaping condition on there, so we do require details of landscaping within the site, but I think it is limited as to what we are going to be able to get within the site. I think if we asked for more planting, so if we asked for perhaps tree planting to the normal sort of proportion we would expect on a residential scheme, for example, where you might be looking for a tree every 3 or 4 spaces, that simply isn't going to be possible on the site. Just by way of context, I think that looking back at the redevelopment of the whole site, the amount of land that we secured for the medical centre was what was the amount of land that was requested by the NHS at the time. So with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps that should have been challenged more at the time, which was sort of 10, 12 years ago. But we have the site and we have the land available that we have now. Just with regards to the Riverside Walk, if it's okay, just to come back on that. Councillor Beavis and Councillor Johnson are quite right to raise that as an issue. They've raised it on a number of times with officers, and I in turn have raised it with others more senior than myself. We've had some preliminary work done on it, and we do need to have a meeting with the parish councils to update them. Just waiting for some news on another matter before I come back, so we can try and update them fully on that, but we hope to come back on that shortly. And in terms of getting it open before the centre opens, I know the centre, One Medical Group, have a very ambitious build time frame because of leases expiring on the existing surgeries, but we'll certainly do what we can as officers to try and facilitate that and move that forward. But yeah, we're certainly very aware of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beavis, you did move it with it wanting more planting. Is that made what Neil's just said? Did make you decide that we'll leave the planting condition as it stands?
Yeah, I mean, I was really thinking about on the boundary. I'm well aware members might not pick it up, but there is quite an old piece of scrub land. You might think it's part of the development. It's not. It's just a piece of scrub land between Council and Rippers Court and where the centre is going to be built out. And if there's any extra we can do just to try and diffuse some of that, it would be helpful. But I'm talking more about on the boundary than actually between a lot of car parking spaces.
Okay. This bit up here. Is that bit up there?
Yeah, it is now. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. That's really where I'm thinking of. Just more screening than anything. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened carefully about the parking issue, and I think it's been as overcome as what it can be. Just bearing in mind that House's surgery has a little under 60 spaces, just to give some context to this application. And actually, doctors' parking is quite transactional. You don't long stay car park at a doctor's surgery, or you like to think people don't long stay at a car park in a doctor's surgery. So, again, given your appointment time, you'd like to think you're in and out within 15 or 20 minutes, and so kind of rotating that through the day should give some benefit to car park users. As a few members have said this evening, you'd hope that some more of the local residents would walk to the centre. It's pretty central in Sybil Hedingham. Obviously, the people that are slightly outside of Castle Hedingham, Toppersfield, etc., will probably have to make it by car journey. But like I said, you'd hope that they'll be able to find a space, given that it's a transactional car park rather than a long stay or a short stay car park. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, just very quickly, I'm delighted to see this application's come forward and that we're going to have a brand new medical centre coming forward in the North District. It's lovely to have a positive story to tell about medical facilities for a change. So just would like to comment on, really like the design. Quite right, Neil. I think that's it's going to be quite an interesting and very attractive building. Often these places are terribly functional. I think this is a lot better than that. So I think it's been welcome addition on many fronts to. So obviously there's an issue with the parking. I don't think it will affect. It's obviously not going to affect the patient parking. It's going to be more of an issue of the people who are running this surgery trying to find a place for their staff to park and not interfering with the people who live around about. I hope at this point to hear that there wasn't sufficient consultation, but I hope that many of the residents' views have been taken to council as possible. That's all. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too would just like to add my voice to, I think, what will be a very good medical facility for this part of north of the district. It's been waited for some time, and I agree with Councillor Parker. I think the design is extremely good. It's put forward by the company. I think it will fit into what is already built there extremely well. And I take on board all of the comments, but as Councillor Ritchie said, with use, hopefully, and people walking, those that can, to use this facility will be great. But I think what's really important is not only will we having all of the medical in one place and the expertise as well, with the relative employment, but I think it's going to be of great service to all of our rural villages as well. So everybody will know where to go, and it will amalgamate from the current 3 down to 1. So I can see there'll be some economic advantages and physical advantages of having this all in one place. And I know that many of the parish councils in the rural areas that were consulted also welcome this in a big way, and it's going to be a great facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Members, this is our final meeting for this civic year, and I would just like to thank you all for your support, and I would also like to thank you very much for your patience when we were working remotely. It was not the easiest thing to do, but we got through it. And Councillor Horner is standing down from planning, so I'd like to just thank him and say, we'll miss you, but good luck.
Thank you for those kind words.
And thank you to the staff for this evening, and thank you to Alison. And look forward to the next. Yeah, I close the meeting at 10. I'm going to go by the clock. I started by. It's 10:42. Good. Thank you.